Tuesday, October 18th, 2022, regularly scheduled Board of Education meeting. I call the meeting to order at 7 o'clock. And if I could please have the board secretary call the roll.
Mrs. Stufen.
Present.
Mr. Collins.
Yep.
Mr. Kaczynski.
Here.
Mrs. Arvanites.
Here.
Mrs. Hostler.
Here.
Mrs. Caforio.
Here.
Mrs. Troutman. Here.
All right, we have all 7 board members present. And at this time, I would ask that we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So tonight we're going to kick off the meeting with our school, one of our school spotlights, which is Emerson Elementary School tonight. So I see we have the principal and
Our assistant principal.
assistant principal.
My first board meeting.
Okay. All right. All right. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Shalene Delackery. I am the very proud principal of Emerson.
And I'm Josh Murrah. I'm the also very proud assistant principal at Emerson.
And tonight we are very excited to share with you one of the great things happening at Emerson, which is celebrating individual student success. As our namesake says, our greatest glory is not in never failing, but in rising up every time we fail. And that's something that we're very proud of that we're doing this year. Every year we choose a theme song, and so this year it is Standing in the Hall of Fame. We will not sing for you, but you can find it on YouTube. And it's all about encouraging people to be whatever they want. One of my favorite lines is, you can be a teacher, you can be a rock star. And so that's what we're trying to work with our students on, is that they can be anything they put their minds to. So using SEL survey data, we identified an area of focus under self-awareness, which was goal setting. And so going along with our theme song, we wanted our students to be able to find a way to stand in their own Hall of Fame. We want every child to have that opportunity to be successful and to be celebrated. And within that self-awareness category, it is about goal setting and sticking to your goals and revising those goals. So throughout this year, students will set, monitor, celebrate, and fine-tune their goals, which they've been doing since the beginning of the year. And then those goals and accomplishments are recognized in our Hall of Fame.
I wanted to sing for you, just for the record. Okay, so based on our Panorama Ed data, like Shalene said, we decided to focus on self-awareness and goal setting. And as you can see here, only 36% of our students responded favorably to goal setting. So one of their questions was, how often do you stay focused on the same goal for more than 3 months at a time? So based on that data, we decided to have our students set long-term goals for themselves for this school year. And so the first week of school, each student received one of these pennants, and this was our Hall of Fame kickoff, and we did sing that song a lot during that first week of school. So each student set a goal. It was either an academic goal, an SEL goal, whatever goal they wanted to set for the school year. And you can see we use these pennants and we decorated the halls with them, so our students have constant reminders of what they are working towards this year.
We also created stickers that students can put on their take-home folders, assignment notebooks, sometimes their Chromebooks that we help them take off when they need to. But we also have them setting short-term goals. So they all received this sticker that says Goal Getter, what's your Hall of Fame goal? And you can see that our students set various goals. And one of the things that was really important to us was that they were not strictly academic. It is it ranges. In kindergarten and first grade, our students are setting goals to make new friends. Some of our students, as you can see up here, learning a new coding language. Some of them were about reading a full chapter book on their own. And we also model this. We all have, as teachers, also have these stickers in various places. Katie Lyons has one as well when she was at our kickoff for it. And so we want to make sure that we're modeling this with them, that we reset goals when we reach them. So the way that we celebrate our goal getters at lunch is before every Friday, our teachers talk to the students about their goals. Have you made your goals? Why or why not? What do you think you need to do in order to continue striving toward that goal? However, if the students have made their goal, they put their names in a spreadsheet, and every Friday during lunch, we call the students up. They get to ring a bell that we have hanging in our cafeteria, and then they get a certificate and they take a picture, which then goes in our Hall of Fame. So these are just some highlights of our first goal getter celebration at lunch. One of my favorite pictures is that bottom left, because it's been incredible to see all the other students cheering on those that have actually reached their goals. They get super excited. Sometimes as the principal, once we're done, I'm like, okay, that's enough. Let's bring it down a little bit. But they are just so excited, and we're really proud of them. So here's some more kids coming down and receiving their certificates. And then this is our Goal Getter Hall of Fame. So we have 99 students who have made their goals so far, which is just under a fourth of the Emerson students. So we're really excited that all of our students are going to have an opportunity to be in the Hall of Fame and meet their own individual goals. So that's what's been happening at Emerson. And as our students say at the end of every daily announcement, standing in the Hall of Fame. It's really good. It's amazing.
It is truly such a cool experience every Friday to see them with their names called and ringing that bell. They're just so excited. It is awesome.
Yes. Yeah. So that's it.
It's
Thank you.
fantastic. Thank you. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Kaczynski, who's going to give a little recognition to our principals.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we wanted to recognize our principals. This is Principal Appreciation Week in the state of Illinois, and Tanya's going to play a little clip of our principals with our students while I make a few comments. But especially in a district like ours, where we have neighborhood schools before high school, principals are key to driving the culture for our students and our families across the district. And they've shown quite a bit of adaptability in these past couple of years. And we just wanted to make sure that we recognized that and said thank you. And for me, with District 205, when I think of principals, there's one story that sticks out. It was the end of last school year. After I picked up my kids, I wanted to stay behind and say thank you to the principal and staff members that were waiting outside. And I ended up standing in a line for about 20 minutes or so of students, that had formed a line to say thank you. And it was a nice moment of just the community coming together, showing appreciation, and kids that had been there for kindergarten through 5th grade, saying bye before they moved up to middle school and such. And it was a good moment, and I think something that we strive for as a district, to have that true sense of community in our neighborhood schools. So thank you, and happy Principal Appreciation Week.
All right. Next on the agenda is public comments. So we've got, I believe, 4 speakers signed up tonight. We've allowed up to 3 minutes per public comment for speaker concerning items on the agenda, as well as communication, petitions, reports from citizens or representatives of other public agencies. We ask that you be respectful. Please identify yourself, your first and last name. The board secretary will remind you when you have 30 seconds left. So with that, we'll call our first speaker.
Sally Cassidy.
I'm Sally Cassidy. I'm an Elmhurst resident who raised 3 children here. I served as Edison PTA president and on the York Booster Board. I also worked at Jefferson, Hawthorne, and Edison schools and was fortunate to build strong relationships with Elmhurst students, families, administrators, and teachers over the past 44 years. Like most of us, my husband and I moved to Elmhurst for the strong public schools. We've been consistently pleased with the quality of education in 205. In fact, my oldest daughter returned to York, where she taught in the English department, has taught in the English department for the past 17 years. Since 2005, my daughter has helped thousands of students sharpen their literacy and critical thinking skills in class, build their confidence and leadership capacities as an assistant and head coach, and empowered them for success in college and life. Over her decades-long career here, she's been beloved and respected by students, parents, and her colleagues at York. Over the past year and a half, our state representative, Deanne Mazzocchi, and the EPIC group she is affiliated with have targeted and attacked my daughter and her co-teacher with lies, disinformation, and vitriol at school board meetings, on their Facebook page, in private emails to board members and administrators, in right-wing media outlets, and on their EPIC webpage. While claiming to want transparency, Deanne Mazzocchi has spread disinformation that fake activities and assignments exist. And when the teachers and district failed to produce the content that she's invented, she claims they're hiding something. Deanne Mazzocchi has lied in public comment and has called on 205 to clean house and fire these two dedicated and exceptional teachers. I still work in education, so I'm aware that when Deanne Mazzocchi ridicules 205 for their supposed lack of curriculum transparency, she fails to mention that via Google Classroom, she has access to every assignment and every lesson in the American Studies course she attacks because her student was enrolled last year. While teachers spent the years acting with class and discretion, respecting and nurturing her child as a thinker, learner, and adolescent, Deanne and the EPIC group continued to publicly attack them, worked privately to ban books, and regurgitated extremist right-wing talking points to the extent that the teachers feared for their safety. The idea that advocating book bans, targeting teachers, and cribbing from a far-right playbook might be smart politics in Elmhurst saddens and terrifies me. The pandemic in the past several years have polarized citizens and fractured bonds in the community, and Deanne has played an outsized role in stirring up our schools and peddling conspiracies that our schools have been ideologically compromised.
30 seconds.
An electoral victory for her would not be a good look for Elmhurst, a community known for its neighborly, family-oriented culture and sensible values. I want to thank the board for your continued service and for recognizing that a holistic and inclusive history is not indoctrination, and that reading and studying the accounts of people who have strived to make this country a more perfect union is a valuable and appropriate experience for our students. Thank you for your commitment to providing a high-quality education for every 205 student and for your time and dedication as board members. Thank you.
The next speaker, is Dave Zerkowski.
Hi, Dave Zerkowski. I have 4 kids in the through the system, 2 still going and 2 are out. Hello, everybody. Hi, Dr. Campbell. I met a couple of you guys tonight, so thank you. I just want to bring up a couple of things that I am concerned about, not only for our schools, but for Elmhurst in general. And these are observations, and they kind of tie some things together. And one of those is we, as a community, are tied to Chicago, for good or for bad. There's a lot of things that aren't run properly. There's a lot of crime. There's a lot of things there that could be better, certainly. There's a lawless environment downtown that is driving big businesses out. Tyson Foods, Boeing, Citadel, Caterpillar. The Chicago public school system has struggled for many years, and it does have impacts for us. Quality of life in Illinois and Elmhurst, another topic. On January 1st, there's a safety act that is being going into effect, and we're going to see some felons come out of jail for crimes that probably they shouldn't be released for. We have a zero cash bail policy, and this is, I say ironically, is called the Safety Act. Why am I concerned? The same people creating these policies are also responsible for developing policies for our public schools. I'm concerned about what we are having to defend ourselves against, and so I'm saying that we think we have to stop pretending that some of these policies are serving our community well. We are impacted by leadership that is not helping us, and I think the mayor of Chicago and the governor have great enthusiasm for campaigning and being visible at events that do them, that help them get elected, but yet they're invisible to support victims of crimes. They're invisible to support police officers. In 2021, there was 3,561 shooting victims in Chicago and 797 murders. That's just in Chicago. I'm concerned that the priorities of the communities around us are slightly out of whack, and we are going to be subject to that. Illinois Public Schools. The Wall Street Journal had an article 3 weeks ago that was called Illinois' Shocking Report Card. The land of Lincoln is failing its children and it's covering it up. It obviously was not a pleasant article to read, and I'm not talking about ourselves here, but that was an eye-opener. Next topic, Tom Chavez and Epic. I met Tom a month ago. I don't view him as an enemy to anybody. He's delivering information and data that potentially the board may have chosen to give out sooner.
30
I think
seconds.
Tom has identified an urgent problem, and it is some sinking scores and sinking performance. This is the enemy we have to battle, and I'd like to fix that with common sense and actionable items and measurable criteria. And last piece is my mom was a Chicago public school teacher for 25 years, and she helped a Korean-born boy get to the spelling bee finals in Washington, D.C. in 1976. It was fantastic.
3 minutes.
But what that young man was able to do was focus on reading, writing, math, and arithmetic, and I think some of the things that are just basic school topics, and it served him very well. That is my hope for our community here as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Tom Chavez.
Hi, good evening. My name's Tom Chavez. At the last board meeting, I presented facts and data that show social emotional learning is not, in fact, improving student academic outcomes. Not in Chicago, not in Elmhurst, not anywhere. The evidence simply does not support those claims, so I think we should stop making them. Today, I want to share what I've learned about students who fall behind academically, the probability they'll catch up, the impact on their opportunity to succeed in the future. Proficiency has been dropping for more than 7 years in District 205, and the 2021 data shows almost 60% of 8th graders are below grade level in ELA and math. What does this mean? According to ACT, students at high-performing schools who have fallen far behind academically in 4th and 8th grades have less than a 1 in 3 chance of being ready for college or career by the end of high school. Only 10% of students who are far behind their peers in college and career readiness benchmarks in reading in 8th grade were able to meet readiness benchmarks in 12th grade. For students who perform more than a standard deviation below their peers in 8th grade, 32% caught up in reading, 21% caught up in science, 17% caught up in math by 12th grade. Another study by the American Federation of Teachers explained that there's a 90% chance that a poor reader in 1st grade will remain a poor reader, and that children's reading skills wouldn't improve unless they were taught directly and intensively. So what does that mean for Elmhurst? According to ACT and the AFT, many kids in our community will never catch up academically. What about the kids at Conrad Fisher, where 80 to 90% of 5th graders test below grade level in core academic subjects? This learning problem follows the kids to Churchville, where 75% test below grade level in ELA and math. What does their future look like? Does anyone care? The district doesn't talk about it, and there's no mention of it in the long-term strategic plan. Why not? This is a massive problem that requires direct and intensive intervention to overcome. I did some research on how other educators are approaching the problem and found something worth sharing. It's called How to Catch Students Up in Less Time, 6 Strategies to Expedite Learning Recovery. Here they are. Number 1, prioritize limited instructional time on the skills that matter most. That would be at core academic subjects.
30 seconds.
Use summer prepare to learn days to gather sample data on student learning gaps. Number 3, develop district-wide knowledge on the science of learning and its implications for instruction. Number 4, redesign small group instruction to target students' underlying skill deficits in reading and math. Number 5, crowdsource virtual tutor volunteers to provide additional skill-based support. Number 6, source promising learning recovery solutions directly from teachers. These 6 strategies provide something the D205 strategic plan does not. Clear, concise action items aimed at achieving immediate academic recovery.
It's 3 minutes. Thank you.
The survey data in the D205 strategic plan shows 70% of parents wanted kids ready for the next grade or college and career ready.
Thank you.
Only
Next speaker, please.
36% wanted social emotional learning needs addressed. Thank you.
Next speaker is Jamie Scherer.
Hi. My name is Jamie Scher, Jamie Esker Scher, and I apologize. I don't have this written down. It's just notes on my phone, so I'm going to be looking at my little screen here. Last month, the district presented a K-5 workshop on literacy put on by Katie Lyons. This workshop outlined Wit and Wisdom, the new literacy curriculum purchased by the district, and highlighted some of its perceived benefits. Our community was shocked to understand the district purchased a new literacy program that did not include a dual language component and thus excluded our most at-risk children at Conrad Fisher. There are many highly regarded data-driven literacy curriculums that have a dual language component. Please explain to our community why this administration purchased and this board approved the purchase of a literacy program that excluded Conrad Fisher children. My name is Jamie Esker Scher, and I will be running for school board in this next election, so all children in Elmhurst have an opportunity for academic success, including the kids at Conrad Fisher. Thanks.
Okay. All right, moving on in our agenda, the next item is approval of board meeting minutes. Approval of regular board meeting minutes for September 27th, 2022. Did anyone have any changes to those? Okay, those meeting minutes stand as presented. All right, so tonight we are going to begin discussing the most recent data that we have for our students. And as we do that, I think just something to remember for all of us is while we're talking about data, we're really talking about students. And we want all our students to be able to be equipped when they leave District 205 to achieve their own dreams and goals. And so it's really important that we look at the data, but also remember that it's students. And yeah, we want them all to be doing well. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Campbell and let you begin.
Yes, thank you, President Cafario. As shared in previous presentations, our administrative staff is going to, on the next couple of times that we get together as a board team at a board meeting, both our committee of the wholes as well as board meetings that are to come, we have a series of information as it relates to data that is being analyzed and looked at. And tonight, we are starting with our district assessments, specifically our MAP assessment that is given over 3 times throughout the course of the school year. So this data, which we will share and give more explanation to the purpose of this data and how we are going to use and how we've already begun to use this data. But prior to that, I just wanted to set a little bit of context for our conversation tonight regarding our district assessments. What you will see in tonight's data is a very high-level overview of our MAP data. What I would like to give voice to prior to this is that our school teams, our principals, our coaches, our teachers, our specialists, and even as we heard tonight, our students are looking at and responding to data on a daily basis. Even in an individual lesson, teachers are collecting multiple sets of data, which I'm going to also use the word information, to determine the next move. There is research on the extraordinary number of decisions that a teacher has to make at any given moment. More decisions, minute by minute, than a brain surgeon. The most conservative estimate from this data has teachers making an approximate 130 decisions per hour during a 6-hour school day. And this reflects only those decisions made within the classroom. This extraordinary and daunting and often intimidating for many new teachers and for teachers. And it makes the support from our administrators as well as colleagues so vital. Additionally, our teachers engage in informational conversations daily and formally through their weekly meetings in professional learning communities to examine student work and not only access what was taught, but dig deeply into what students learn. This allows our teachers to uncover the root cause of what might be getting in the way of our students' learning and to help make the instructional adjustments. Tonight, we will provide a high-level overview of our district map data, but I want to highlight how much data is actually being collected, analyzed, and responded to on a daily basis. This board and all of the administrators are relentlessly focused on creating the conditions to continue to achieve academic excellence by supporting individual students. And so with that, I'm going to ask my colleagues to begin this presentation. Dr. Grins, that was the perfect cue up for you. At that moment, and that moment.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
And you paused.
Sorry. I appreciate your time, and thank you for the introduction, Dr. Campbell. As we have discussed throughout the year, we do provide and administer diagnostic exams as well as formative and summative assessments using evidence-based practices, and we present those growth measures to the district and the community on a regular basis. We've started that suite of presentations last year. Typically it was one presentation in the past. It was very big, and we've broken it down now to a series of presentations. We do 4 on a regular basis, and then we add on, I think last year we had 9 total, to make sure that we're covering all the bases, to make sure that we're keeping everyone informed, and to make sure that we're reporting out on the progress. So tonight we will focus on, as mentioned, the NWA MAP assessment. This was traditionally used in the district, not with as much frequency as we have added on after the pandemic, to make sure that we have more real-time data on our students and to make sure that it is supporting some of the planning taking place in the schools. We also added it on for grade levels. So at this point in time, every single student available has taken the, in K-8, has taken the NWA MAP assessment. We have a series of district goals that we've talked about, and our focus for this year is to anchor the district in those goals, specifically elevating Tier 1 instruction. That's something we started to talk about as well last year, and have started to really make sure we maintain a focus on that. I want to explain a little bit about that first goal. It says that 70% of our kindergarten eligible students will achieve building middle level or higher on targeted DRDP measures. And the DRDP is an assessment instrument designed for teachers to observe, document, reflect on learning, development, and progress of children. It looks at a number of different areas, things like self-regulation, language and literacy development, English language development, etc. Across grades 3 to 8, we're looking at a 10% increase in the previous annual percentage of students who are meeting and exceeding on the Illinois Assessment of Readiness. We'll be talking more about that in the next presentation, October 26th as well. In grade 11, 5% increase of students meeting benchmarks on SAT. Again, talking about that more on the 26th as well. Prior to high school graduation, we want to achieve a 5% increase in our Sealed by Literacy Awards and Illinois State Commendation toward by Literacy. And then across all grades 1 to 12, we want to see a 5% increase of the previous annual percentage of students' self-awareness and self-management skills. So this slide here in front of you, before we talk about the data, I just want to root us a little bit in some shared awareness of how we are taking action across the district. Dr. Campbell just mentioned several examples. You saw some really great snapshots of Emerson. But one of the things I've noticed this year is the support for administrators and regular data review meetings and the planning cycles has increased. So if you remember, we talked about the Learning Together presentation on September 27th. And the real focus there is intentionality and alignment. So the use of data this year is more intentional and in line than I have felt in the past. We're focused on specific assessment data, not just at a high level, but looking at it in the school, the classroom, teacher goal setting, et cetera. You may, from teacher goals, see even some of those alignment of instruction practices taking place and being talked about at students at home as well. The second item there is the deeper analysis around things like subclaim data. I'll talk a bit about that when you see, again, some of the high-level data tonight, but we are taking a deeper, more granular focus this year and looking at specific areas within content-specific domains. So instead of talking about reading data, we're going a step further, looking at things like literary text, seeing where there may be actionable next steps, etc. We focused heavily on literacy and mathematics over the past year. We identified that coming out of the pandemic as two key areas for us to really have a strong core focus on. That led to, I think, a strong skill set on our school teams because they became more and more comfortable and familiar with looking at specific data related to math and related to reading. And as I mentioned, even students are beginning to goal set. You saw some pictures and the variation of that just at Emerson tonight. But there are also several examples, students taking home goal-setting templates, things related to that across the district. Later in the evening, we're going to discuss a little bit more of a focus on reviewing math resources and some practices that we have in mind to identify specific opportunities for improvement there. And then we've also taken on a new component to the NWA MAP assessment this year, which is the addition of the MAP reading fluency. So MAP reading fluency is an adaptive screening and progress monitoring assessment. We use it in grades K2, and this provides educators with a comprehensive report looking at early literacy skills for our students, and it takes about 20 minutes. I share that because sometimes a concern can be that we are assessing too much. And then the last item there is there really is a lot to celebrate. The data has been a real focus for that and has allowed us to see real progress, identify that progress, but definitely not lose focus on opportunities for continuous improvement throughout the future. So NWA, let's talk a little bit about what this assessment is before we dive into some of the data. This occurs 3 times as mentioned, fall, winter, and spring. In the past, we've done it in the fall. In the past, we've done it in the fall and the spring, but for the last 2 years, we are starting to get in a consistent routine with fall, winter, and spring. Right now, the fall data is really a baseline. It helps us determine the rate of growth for our students, and then the results are also going back to families. They should have received those via email already. When we get the winter and spring data, we'll see even more growth for our students because we have that comparison of those same students, cohort to cohort, test to test. MAP has developed a unit or a score that they use. It's called the RIT. Similar to feet and inches, this is a stable score that will come up later in the presentation as well. And we're going to also show both achievement data and growth data. And the achievement data I mentioned is just a point in time. And I share that because when we discuss achievement, we oftentimes talk about percentiles, which is a calculation of a student's achievement compared to other students. So a student with a percentile rank, as it mentions there, of 72, scored as well as or better than 72% of the comparable students in the norm group. Growth is also a huge focus with NWA MAP, which is over time. And one of the key components of the MAP assessment is that it utilizes norms. So the most recent norms that it uses are from 2020. It's several million pieces of data related to several million different students taking the assessment, and that helps us have the comparison, and that's how we get a lot of the data comparisons that we use for it. Unlike paper and pencil tests, MAP is adaptive, so it's on a computer. It is a unique set of test questions, so as the students take questions and they answer them correctly, the questions get harder, and if the student answers it incorrectly, the questions can get a little easier. And that's designed that way to measure their growth over time, but again, also help us see their achievement. We will talk a little bit about MAP ranges, not a little bit, but at least 4 slides of it. As mentioned, achievement is a measure of point in time. Achievement percentiles will provide a calculation of a student's achievement compared to other students. And you'll see that we will drill into the percent of our students in the average or above average range. So that blue to green is where we will spend some of the data focus here this evening. Up first, we have reading. So this is the fall reading achievement. It shows the percent of our students achieving in the average or above average percentile range. Important to keep in mind, you're looking at the green and the blue. Those are 2 different cohorts of students. So we organized the data to show the fall data in the green. So those students would have been the year prior. And then the fall 22 data in blue for grades K-5 here. So you see in this example, in the fall, this most recent assessment that students finished, 80.8% of our 5th graders are achieving at or above the 41st percentile. And last year, just to help with the graph, it was 80.2% of our 5th graders achieving at or above the 41st percentile when they took the fall 2021 MAP assessment. On the table on the right, you'll see the percent of students achieving average or above average on the fall 22 MAP for grades K-8. So I'll point that out again. That table is K-8, and that's listed by specific programs and demographics. More specifically, IEP, English learners, free and reduced lunch, and then the district overall. So for the district overall, 80.1% of our students in grades K-8 are achieving at or above the 41st percentile. When you look at grades 6 to 8, same data arrangement, the percent of students achieving in the average or above average percentile. The data shows a little more for us just while getting more and more comfortable with it, knowing that we use this as an instructional tool, especially now in the fall. To me, it feels like school started several months ago, but we still do have new students and new opportunities with those students. So having that fall data right away at the beginning of the year allows teachers to have a much better understanding of who their students are. It allows us to provide intentional student groupings, helps with differentiated instruction, and really supports the classrooms as they start to focus on what those growth targets may be from the winter and then the spring. And again, the table on the right is the same as the chart before it. This chart's a little different. I want to point out something that we realized may not be obvious. The first glance at a chart that is similar to this might look like a decline in learning or a decline in student achievement. But what this chart is doing is it's showing the actual projected growth for our students based on the norm data from NWA in reading. So what this says is that in those blue columns, you're looking at and seeing what NWA projects that those students from the same cohort from last year to now, how much in those RIT scores should they have grown based on the norm data from the other 11 million students involved in NWA MAP. So for example, if we look at grade 5, we see that they were projected when they were in 4th grade it shows that their observed growth, they were supposed to grow 7.9 RIT points, and they actually had a RIT growth of 9, if that makes sense. So D205 is the green triangles. The blue is the projected growth from NWA from all the other students across the study and the norms that are used. We added a small text box there just to help indicate that at upper grade students, especially those with high achievement, there may be a smaller growth projection. So that, blue chart, in wondering why is NWA providing and stating and asserting that students will grow less throughout their grades, that is that reasoning for the margin is those students high achieving and as they progress through the upper grades. We'll see this chart again in a minute as it relates to math and have a chance to kind of think through what that means and the implications for our students and their planning. This slide is a projection of our students on the IAR, and those linkages between this data with NWA MAP and other spaces related to the IAR is an ongoing process. This helps our teachers in working with students, goal setting, things like that. But in this example, again, we're looking at the fall MAP data that just occurred, and we are looking at the projections from that fall data for the spring IAR. And you'll see that of our 8th graders, 43% are projected to be at a level 4 or 5 on the IAR. Level 4 or 5 is considered proficient on that state-based exam. The IAR is used heavily with our schools, both in planning as well as breaking down the data to look at possible areas of growth for schools as well as specific students. Looking at math, again, now that you have potentially a little more familiarity with the charts, we tried to add a little more focus to these from last year's fall presentation and get a little bit more of a rhythm. We used to provide reading math. Now we've just grouped it by subject matter to help provide a little bit more focus. So again, this slide is achievement. It is again a point in time measure for math. If you were to look at example 4th grade, you'll see 80.6 of our 4th graders achieving at or above the 41st percentile. In the fall last year, there was 74.6 of 4th graders achieving in that percentile range. Again, different students, but if helpful to have the comparison from last year to now. When looking at the middle school, again in math, we see 77% of our 7th graders achieving at the average or above average percentile range. And as a district, 78.5% of our students achieving average or above average as it relates to, again, the fall map. One data point, a new piece of data for us. Students recently finished it, but definitely a helpful metric for us to look at as we start to plan ahead. And again, the growth projected versus the observed. Again, the green arrows where the D205 student growth occurred as it relates to each grade. And the blue is the projected growth for our students that, again, we receive from NWA MAP based on their norm study. So again, looking at this example, you can see what those students were projected to receive from the last year in the blue, and then where they actually landed this fall when they took the assessment. And then in math, IAR projections, again, a helpful tool for us. Many of our plans are based around this. What's nice about the projection from NWA to MAP is admittedly we don't receive the IAR results as quickly as we'd like. That assessment's taken in the spring, and they are oftentimes not received until late into the summer. But this projection is helpful for us and is something that we try to do as much as we can. We did not provide this in the fall last year, and we will work to provide it when we administer the NWA assessment in the future as well. But in this particular example, you'll see 31% of 8th graders projected to achieve a level of 4 or 5 in the IER, which again is considered proficient. This is definitely an area we want to look into more. So this would be an example of something that we're analyzing and looking at and seeing what is it as it relates to the different math components that may be an area for us to improve. Following up on the general overview of taking action and just the differences that have occurred and the increased focus and the alignment, my colleague, Ms. Katie Lyons, is going to talk about my school case study and looking a little bit deeper into what that data plays out in those different school settings.
So this is just a very brief deep dive into what a school looks like when they engage in the data review process. And so just wanted to share with you, based on our NWEA map growth and NWEA reading fluency, what it looks like for a school team, excuse me, to really dig into that data. So what you'll see here on the left, and you don't have to be concerned with the numbers, it's more about the process that I'm gonna talk through today that school teams take to really respond to the data. So what you'll see here in particular is a school team digging into the NWEA map growth data and then making some instructional adjustments. In particular, I'm gonna highlight the K2 literacy focus that this school was engaging in this data meeting about. So for students that performed at the 30th percentile or below at our NWEA map growth literacy assessment, we then administered the NWEA reading fluency assessment to those targeted individual students to ensure that we were getting a better picture of our students' literacy journey and really unpacking what about foundational skills might be getting in the way of our students' literacy success. So that NWEA reading fluency assessment was an additional measure for teachers to step back, reflect on the data, and then make a targeted plan alongside our psychologists, reading specialists, and EL teachers. So this is just an example of a fact that grade level review meetings, review meetings are happening on a weekly basis, but we really do a larger step back in the fall and the winter and the spring based on our progress monitoring data as well as data collected from our NWEA assessments.
I'm sorry, did you say psychologist?
So in addition to our school teams, alongside our school leaders, instructional coaches, psychologists, and our EL teachers, we go ahead and we also triangulate the data with our curriculum embedded assessments. So included in that, I wanted to highlight some data collected from our Foundations curricular resource, which is used across our district at all 8 schools in our monolingual and dual language classrooms in grades K through 8, or K through 3, my apologies. So if you take a look here, these are our unit assessments that are based on standards and they are developmentally appropriate for students at that level. This is just a quick example of what a unit assessment analysis looks like when our teachers dig deeply into item analysis. We're not looking at overall percentages, but we're really looking at how our students are doing in those particular foundational skills. And so in addition to the review that we do with NWEA and IAR, we also use this data to both tailor our instruction for students that need targeted supports, but it also allows teachers to think about how they can make adjustments in Tier 1 or whole group instruction for all students, including enrichment for students that are ready to move beyond. So just to kind of give an example from a school, and this is all really just taken from school data teams, where you see the student A, B, C, and D, that's actually a data worksheet that schools use to triangulate the data. So you'll see that there is Fontes and Pinnell levels that were reflected on from last year to this year. You'll see that the school team was looking at our fall map data, as well as where you see screener flag. That is a flag that comes out of students that were targeted to take the NWEA fluency assessment. And the flag comes up on students' data report for students that are indicated that they are projected to score below the 20th percentile on spring map without early intervention. And so we now have this additional assessment measure that can help us with these early intervention measures. And so that flag will will showcase how we really need to target certain students. And it's very helpful for our teachers. You'll also see that we have a column here that says teacher flag, because we know that summative assessment data and screeners are just a piece of the picture, but as we triangulate our data, we also want to value and honor our teachers' observations of what they're seeing students demonstrate in the classroom. And then the last two columns there, you'll see data collected from our unit embedded assessments from Foundations. And so from that data, and this again is just a snapshot, we are doing this with all of the students in our buildings, you can see that this team, which again included our teachers, our school leaders, our psychologists, our EL specialists, our reading specialists, and our instructional coaches, came together to then have a real response to the data. And we've targeted and identified certain students into the three groupings here. This is just an example of where we are going to then utilize our resources within our buildings to target instruction. So you'll see in group 1, we've identified students who need intensive support, and we'll use the Wilson Reading System with a particular reading specialist trained in that to support and personalized learning for those 5 students. You'll see in our second group, that's considered an early intervention group, and we'll use and layer on support from Foundations, level 1, which is the first grade materials from Foundations. And then you'll see in group 3, this will be led by our EL specialists, and also considered an early intervention group, but that group also needs a particular focus on fluency alongside that double dose of Foundations, which is our word recognition support. So I think what's really important here is that the work here doesn't end. We engage in 6-week cycles of learning with our students. So after we've used and triangulated the data to figure out what is the most appropriate targeted action for our students, and we've grouped them, we then engage in a 6-week learning cycle, and we utilize our progress monitoring tools to step back and reflect after 6 weeks of what interventions we're taking are actually working, and if not, how do we adjust? So I just wanted to quickly give a little bit of a view of the work that students take, because when we look at the district level data, sometimes it gets lost how teachers really are unpacking that data and making instructional decisions daily, but also really in those formative data meetings in a larger school setting with multiple people at play. So I'm going to hand it back to Dr. Grenz.
Thank you, Ms. Lyons. So we recognize MAP is K-8. It used to be 2-8. So we do want to make sure that, obviously the other data points are shared. Again, following the sequence established last year on the upcoming October 26th Board meeting, which is a committee of the whole, we will be looking at results from state and national assessments. That's when we have a chance to dive deeper into the IAR results, which is grades 3-8. We'll look at various high school and post-secondary indicators, specifically SAT achievement, early college coursework, everything from advanced placement to dual credit, graduation rate, post-secondary enrollment, 9th grade on track, and we'll talk a bit more about school improvement planning as it relates to those data points as well. So I hope this is helpful. I'm definitely happy to answer any questions if you may have any.
And Dr. Grenz, can you just make a note as to why the state assessments next week and not this week?
Yes, great point. So the state assessments are currently under embargo, which is a data review and clarification of the data to make sure that everything is accurate and precise before the data gets revealed. Each of those data points are revealed publicly by the Illinois State Board of Education on October 27th, which will also be publicly available online in the Illinois School Report Card. And we'll make sure that we're definitely providing heavy communication out to our community regarding that, as well as our student progress on each of those indicators as well.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments? I know I have some, but I can let somebody else go. Chris?
Yeah, I had a few. Thank you for the presentation. First, I wanted to go to maybe the second page. I just want to make sure I'm understanding these goals correctly for the next 2 years. So it's all right. So what I'm looking at is where it says one of our objectives is a 10% increase in percentage of students that are meeting or exceeding on the IAR. Right, so if we turn to page, sort of the reading IAR projections. So like what grade levels is that goal referring to? And then if we look at the IAR projections on reading slide next, like what would that mean our goal is?
Great question. So we are looking on that goal at grades 3-8 combined. So an average of those grades 3 through 8. Those are the grades that take the IAR. Using NWA to identify where we're at on that is helpful, and allows for us to actually see what that would look like. But not having prior fall IAR projections using NWA map, that's a little difficult. But it would be basically it'd be disaggregating all those 3rd through 8th to see where we're at last year,
Yep.
which we'll talk more about on the 26th, and then seeing how can we improve and meet that 10% increase over 2 years, using that data that we take in the spring. So we take the IAR eventually in the spring, so that will be the benchmark, if you will, for that
Are
goal.
you able to flip to the summary slide for reading?
The yellow, correct?
Sorry, I don't have page numbers on mine, but
We'll number
either
them
reading
next
or math,
time too.
either
I think
one.
numbering would help.
yeah, so that right there. So what you're saying is that like 8th grade, for example, it's 31% are level 1 or 2. So our goal is to take that from 31% to 21% over 2 years. Is that the right way to look at this? Okay, so how do I think about the 10% when I look at those percentages there?
We're mainly focused on the greens and the blues. So those are our students who are meeting, and that's what we want to improve.
Okay, so we
Now
want
that
to
may mean that
increase-
we're improving in other areas too,
Okay,
but those are our 4s and our 5s.
yeah, which is the same as having less in the other ones,
Yeah.
but okay, all right, yeah, okay.
But I think the question is that, all right, so go to 8th grade, there's, what is that, 43%?
Yeah, we want it to be
43%. So are you saying in the next 2 years, we're gonna see 10%, a 4% increase in that? Am I doing that math? Like 10% of
We want to go from
43%?
43 to 53.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're saying 43 to 53? No, I don't think that's
No?
what they're saying. That's,
Okay,
right, I think you're saying.
Using the spring data from last year. So these are just projections. These are like progress monitoring opportunities for us.
yeah, okay.
Well, I just,
But
This is helpful. It's helpful as a tool, but our actual line in the sand that we want to grow from is the spring of last year,
yeah, okay.
if that makes
understood.
sense.
All right, but it's 4 and 5, we're trying to increase by 10%.
Correct. I mean, 3 too. I mean, we want everything being
Yep.
lifted up. Yep.
Okay. Then, if you could go to, there's a chart showing like K through 8 IEP EL, free and reduced lunch. And
For
sort of the
reading?
percentage achieving there. So, yeah, that's fine. So, are those numbers relatively static over the years, or the 52, the 47, or has that come down a lot in the last few years? Like, what's the historical context there?
Let's see. I've got it. So last year, at this time in the fall, our IEP percent was 49.5. Our EL was 41.1. Our free and reduced lunch was 47.6. And our district was 78.7.
Got it. Okay.
And we can do a better job of comparing that if that's something you'd like to.
Yeah, I think over the years, like I'm curious what it was before COVID happened and stuff like that. So, but that you can follow up with that.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Somebody else? Yeah. Jim. Oh, go ahead, Jim.
Just a general comment at what Chris was getting at. Any kind of longitudinal data you can give us in any future presentation is extremely helpful to help us put it in context.
Sure.
Because this snapshot with no historical trend line is very difficult to comprehend where we are and how we're doing.
Sure.
The other question I have, well, I have two more. First of all, our students take these tests in the spring, and then 6 months later, the state of Illinois publishes the results. What takes so long?
Yeah, you are you are definitely not the first to share that feedback. Last year there was such frustration with that the state discussed the idea of looking into a new assessment for that. That's been put on hold, is my understanding. I do not know what the hang up is, but for that reason and others, we do want to make sure we have multiple data points. So that is why we also administer the map in the spring, and it's why we make sure that we're looking at the data on a regular basis. But I share your frustration as well in wishing we had it earlier. We've definitely communicated that feedback to the state as well.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that, because they certainly don't seem to be doing the students of Illinois any favors. Now, can I ask you, so for instance, what Chris was asking about, the 10% increase of previous annual percentage of students meeting and exceeding on IAR. Can you share a few of your strategies to meet that goal?
For reading?
Sure. I mean, I'm just looking for an example. So reading or math, take your pick.
Sure. We do get preliminary IAR results in June. So as a principal team, we are able to step back and reflect on that data to make some preliminary goals. So in June and again in August, we came together through the form of data collaboratives to really reflect on our data and to think about what are our instructional priorities based on that in order to see this increase in student outcomes. And so at that time, we did write district-wide instructional priorities for math and ELA, which I know we briefly explored last time we met, but for ELA in particular, really exploring the importance of building knowledge around building complex texts and this idea of going deep around topics with multiple texts on a topic, which grows vocabulary 4 times faster than any other strategy. We also took a look at our subclaims of written expression and language conventions on IAR, and we recognize that historically as a district, that is where we perform with the most opportunity for growth. And so then we really strategically focused our energies around focusing on sessions this year in professional learning on integrated reading and writing. So not just reading and writing as separate, but how are we integrating it and ensuring that students are able to demonstrate their knowledge in writing based on topics that they're deeply exploring through complex text in reading. And so that integrated approach is also a huge focus of ours this year that we anticipate to see growth on IAR due to that. So I think those two things around really understanding how we're building knowledge for students systematically and coherently within and across grades through what we call the use of complex texts and multiple texts on a topic, and then also through that integrated reading and writing, so writing about what we're reading. So those two strategies are our focus right now for this year. And will continue to be a focus as we explore and monitor progress against our students' success with that. But I will say that in addition to us wanting to elevate student outcomes through that, it is a great deal of professional learning to ensure that our teachers are also equipped to be able to make shifts in their practice that these instructional priorities demand. So that's just a piece on literacy. We'll hear a little bit more actually in just a bit about math, but the focus this year is really thinking about how are we coherently supporting our students when they are showing that there might be some areas of unfinished learning around certain standards. How are we coherently linking it for our students through targeted instruction or going back and doing some relearning around prerequisite standards in math. So those are just a few high-level strategies that our professional learning is grounded in. And we can share more on October 26th about some of those strategies and actually ask you all to reflect on some of those strategies as well in that meeting.
And we'll also have an opportunity for increased longitudinal data in that meeting as well. That will be helpful, I think, based on the feedback also.
Yeah,
and that's what we did last year too. That's a good spot for it because we'll have that data.
Yeah, thank you. That would be great. Just one and I promise it is my one last question. The opportunities for professional learning for our teachers, can you tell me when and where they occur during the school year?
Well, we have over 91 sessions dedicated just to literacy professional learning, but I can give you a high-level overview that we have district-wide sessions where we bring teacher learning cohorts together, we bring principals together, we bring coaches together through different collaboratives, and then that also we also have school-based professional learning through the form of our professional learning communities. We also have certain professional learning partners that we bring in to provide that professional learning as well. So we can, in our Learning Together document that I think we shared last time, we can reshare that actually lays out, we have, so many each month, but it is really, there are district-wide professional learning opportunities, there are school-based professional learning, and then there's job-alike professional learning that's also very important. For instance, bringing coaches together, bringing our grades 4 to 5 teachers together as a cohort.
And I would just add that we've while there is a lot, it's not at all scattershot. We've really tried to make sure that it's very focused and very aligned, but relevant for the different team members across the district. That's been, based on input we've received, but also the data has driven a lot of those focus areas to help us decide what we need to all point and lean into to help improve. So we've received really helpful feedback on that as well, and we'll definitely present at the end of the year on the overall professional learning for the year and some of the feedback and hopefully the learning outcomes that result from that also.
Thank you, because I'm just going to throw it out here. Compiling all this for us to digest and really get into is an overwhelming task. It's overwhelming trying to process it all, so I appreciate it. I also want to say it's great to hear about the reflection that the district and the administrators and the teachers are undergoing. For me personally, I assume that's taking place, and I really would like to hear more actionable steps like Jim asked. That's helpful to hear about, what we're doing specifically to address the deficiencies that we have throughout the system, right? It's great to hear the actionable items. I am looking at this data, and I'd like to hear, and if that's a discussion at the 26th meeting, that's great. But what's happening in second grade? I mean, across the board, we are from fall 21 to fall 22. You guys are like, I know somebody's going to bring it up, but we are losing these kids. Now, they seem to be recovering pretty good in third grade, but what is happening, and not just in the MAP scores, but the projection of the IARs and even the project on that one you just pulled away from, the projection there. I mean, they're not meeting their mark in reading or MAP. I mean, so when I love hearing about actionable items, I hope those are targeted because something is happening there. And I'm worried about those second grade students across the district.
So we just added K and 1 in 21-22. So one of the items that we're really trying to maintain discipline on is the regularity with our data as it relates to MAP. So if I go back, 18-19 we took it fall spring, 19-20 we took it in the fall, 2021 it was fall winter, but second grade only. So now we are in a rhythm. We have K8 fall winter spring. Last year we have fall winter spring, this year K8. So we definitely will be diving deeper. As you mentioned, we anticipated that question. We've talked about that with our school teams. We've contacted even NWA MAP regarding some of the items as well. So we're absolutely following up to make sure that we're learning more about it and then planning accordingly where needed.
But I will say, as one actionable response, we did make a strategic move to adopt both Wit and Wisdom and Foundations, as we saw that in the primary grades in particular, we do see this dip. And so wondering around, where within the foundational skills might we not be securing, having our students have them with full mastery and security and fluency before heading out to third grade, which traditionally we have called, by the end of second grade, you want to transition students from like learning to read in third grade to reading to learn. And so there is a dramatic shift there. And so we have made some shifts intentionally this year around literacy and how we're approaching it to address exactly what we're seeing in the data in particular. So I know this is the math slide, but it is similar in literacy.
Yeah, it definitely looks similar, reading and math, and I appreciate the focus on that, because that's exactly the turning point that I worry about, learning to read, reading to learn, right? And so if we lose them there, it's a hard path or, mountain for them to travel. Can we move, because I do love taking action, can we go to that taking action slide for a heartbeat? I think that's towards the end.
Sorry, the overview or the school example?
Oh, the school example, I'm sorry. The fading in and out of these slides is like it's wigging me out. The transition. I think it's after, yeah, keep going. One more for me. No, I'm sorry, I lied, one more. That's the one I wanted. And I didn't want to interrupt you when you were talking about this. So group 1, group 2, group 3, right? These are all the interventions for kids that are not meeting their benchmarks at any point, right? And when you, down there it says seen by EL teacher during acceleration. So does that mean that they're still doing acceleration in elementary school, and these issues are being addressed through the EL teacher? Like, so are they bringing in people? Like, who's addressing these? Right, I'm sorry. I'm not phrasing my sentence well. I just want to make sure that our, free and reduced lunch, our EL students and our IEP students are getting the support, and it looks like you are giving them the supports they need. And I'm just wondering, where are they getting them throughout the day?
Yeah, I mean, I can help. I know Katie has a frog in her throat, I think there. We do have, what I like about this slide is it shows the degree of intentionality and deep granular diving that the staff is doing. So this is an example that we just grabbed from one of the schools. That particular student is identified as an English learner, so that may be why they are being seen by an EL teacher during acceleration. They also may have specific needs that may have been flagged as a result of the data. In addition, I think when you look at those 3 groupings, you start to see how the teachers are able to take some of this data and actually plan their instruction accordingly with it. So again, getting away from the summative piece that we feel with IER, which is really the end of the race sometimes, and having a more real-time measure and understanding of how can we use the data, how can we shift the instruction, how can we improve the student learning outcomes so that eventually, yes, it improves the IER and helps the students learn more, but real-time, it's allowing for the teaching to improve and for the students to grow as well. So to answer the question of who is seeing these students, it may vary based on the school. I mean, that's just a shortened snapshot of those 4 particular students. But what I like about this is each student is being looked at more depth than the classroom as a whole or those groupings.
And what I like about it, and I'm so glad you pointed out what teacher flag means, because just because a kid isn't necessarily testing well does not mean they're not mastering some of the skills they might need. And so flagging those or testing poorly, so I love the teacher flag. So what about the kids that are meeting the targets or exceeding? What kind of support are we giving them to kind of push them further on the other end?
So, and just also to clarify, in elementary school, we do have this extra 30 minutes of acceleration that is added on to the core. So I don't want it to, I want to make sure it's clear that students aren't being pulled out of grade level whole group instruction. And in particular, we were just focusing in on K2 in this data meeting. As we know, early intervention in K2 is critical. And so all students here are receiving 25 to 30 minutes of foundations at grade level and meeting grade level standards. In addition to that, in our MTSS system, we give a double dose of intervention for students that have been flagged, whether it's by a teacher flag or assessment flag. So that acceleration block is to support students that need early intervention, but during acceleration, it is also an opportunity for our students to receive their REACH supports for students that that are receiving REACH. We can talk about that a little bit more, but it is for more enrichment. But all students are receiving 30 minutes of personalized instruction to elevate instruction for them at their instructional level during that time. This particular example was just more so for that intervention and early intensive support, to give you a snapshot of that.
Okay, and last one, I promise, in Jim's words, my last one, that on the slide before, or 2 slides before, the reading fluency assessment for those kids that are not meeting benchmarks, so that is an additional assessment that are given to the kids. Is that given during the acceleration period, or are they taken out of classroom time for that?
So reading specialists were able to manage and it looked differently at each school, but
Okay.
students weren't pulled out of like tier 1 grade level instruction. It most likely happened during acceleration, but I don't want to speak for all 8 schools based on their structures. It is a pretty 20 minutes of a foundational skills assessment. Kids are taking it on the computer, but it is helpful when a reading specialist is mediating it in more of a small group. And so, that is just an additional measure that we are piloting this year to see if it's really providing more information about a student's literacy journey, both for families, but also for specialists. To see if it is really truly helping with that personalized learning approach. So this year we're going to do a lot of learning. We actually just engaged in a professional learning session on Monday with NWEA to do a deep dive into the data itself and all the psychometrics that went into creating certain cut rate scores for students. And then we went deeply into the progress monitoring probes offered that can help, again, step back and after that 6-week cycle, be able to tell families, be able to share with teachers where we're seeing success for students. But the intent is to accelerate student learning so we can get them out of these intervention programs, again, and back into more grade level and enrichment and beyond.
Thank you.
I just have one other thing. Everything else I had was covered. I was wondering if that was a new assessment that is additional to what we did in the past, and you answer that. Could you just talk a little bit on this slide right here? You talk about everyone that's involved in assessing our students, and the teachers, the reading specialists, the EL specialists, and the school leaders, instructional coaches, and psychologists. Can you just talk a little bit so that everybody can understand and our community can understand as well why it's so important to have all those different pieces and those different people involved in the process and how they can help kids in that
Kevin,
process?
I'm going to ask you, Dr. Rubenstein, if you would take that to give Ms. Lyons a little bit of a break there, reprieve. You've done a great job.
Sure. So every team member has a different level of expertise. So classroom teacher, it's important that they are going to hear the student. There's nothing that can actually replace the power of a classroom teacher hearing their student read out loud, hearing the fluency, hearing the rate, hearing what that sounds like. But a reading specialist listens with a different ear and can actually understand exactly what that looks like. A school psychologist may help to interpret that data. The school administrators are looking at it from a different lens to see, are there any trends that are going on in the school building, to say exactly what Courtney was talking about before. What's happening grade level wise at second grade or in first grade that very few of our students are meeting or exceeding the benchmarks. So it's really an entire team approach that is lending itself to all of this stuff. The other piece of that is that as we look to intervene in each of these situations, the next step in that is going to be to really diagnose and say, hey, what does Kevin need in order to be a more successful learner? So they're going to take that data that we've just gathered, they're going to talk with that classroom teacher, they're going to talk with everybody who has worked with that student, and they're going to make a plan to move forward.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to ask a question. Can you speak to how do you move the students that are in the 41st to 60th percentile? You know, how, you know, we talk, you know, we're talking about, you know, the kids that need support and what that looks like, the tiered support, and then we have programs in place, at least for REACH. But what strategies are in place to move that I'll call it the middle percentile upward? Because I feel like there's, you know, there's a question too about how do we, I'll say we, but how is there an assurance that there's some effective rigor, you know, just like building a muscle, right? Like you have to challenge to get stronger. So could you speak to some of the strategies in place, or how teachers are supported to move those, you know, the focus for that middle 41st to 60th percentile that we, you know, probably needs a little push? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think that is the reason we've been talking so much about Tier 1, is making sure that our curriculum is guaranteed and viable, and that it is something all students have access to, and that it is high quality. You'll remember in that February 22nd presentation last year, when we proposed the ELA resources, we identified that there were opportunities for that to be the case. So that investment in our student learning, in those resources, is absolutely getting at exactly what you just targeted, that middle group, but also the whole group. So Tier 1, something everyone has exposure and experience with, and that's why the goals also are formulated around that keyword as well. It also is the work. So a lot of the school improvement planning that we've engaged in, a lot of the summer planning, a lot of the spring use, all of that culminating into actual data reviews. The name and need is something I've heard more in school visits than ever before, as it relates to actually running data not just by groups and by grade level. We look at it in this room very high level. When you go to the schools and you visit data meetings and PLCs, they have actual student names written down and student charts, and they're working through those bit by bit. And that is really where I think the impressive planning takes place. So that deep dive of a school example, I think, is just one. But really, it is the whole piece of what we're here to do as it relates to school improvement planning, goal setting, regular use of data, but specifically that Tier 1 focus over the last 2 years is something we identified to make sure, based on feedback as well as the data, that everyone was being raised up, as we mentioned earlier.
I think specifically some things we can talk about, just like starting with the master schedule. That's something that's really important to be able to provide students with enough time to be met in small group instruction, which is something we do really well in the district. And so we have 60 minutes built in per literacy block per grade at K-5 to support students in small group instruction. 30 minutes of that is an acceleration, but we also have another 30 minutes set aside for teachers to bring small groups and to identify and target the skills that that group of students, with whatever percentile that they're in, how they can push and beyond. So that is, like, the master schedule is actually a very important structure put into place strategically to help students at the different groupings. So I think that that's just a structure at the school level that really supports and promotes that small group instruction. When we talk about Tier 1 and grade level instruction, something that we're really focused on as well, that will be more of the learning that we do together in the spring, are what are the appropriate scaffolds to complex text for students that might have some things that are getting in the way of them showing mastery with reading that text independently. And so those appropriate scaffolds, such as front-loading vocabulary or utilizing a text that's not as complex on the same topic to start to build understanding. So there are certain strategies that, as you know, what we would call appropriate scaffolds to that complex text, and that will be dug in a bit more during our professional learning sessions, just to give some concrete examples and strategies of like structure, small groups, and then those appropriate scaffolds for that group in particular. It's really important.
Thanks. And then I just wanted to follow up with one other question that maybe is really more IAR, you know, like, so maybe for our next conversation, but could you either now or in the future just talk about the kind of back mapping process, particularly around, I guess, SAT, but IAR or MAP, where, what does it look like for our teachers to engage with the test, right? So if I'm a 5th grade teacher, am I taking the MAP test for both, like 4th and 5th and 6th, or what does that engagement with the actual tests look like for our teachers? And then kind of what does back mapping look like? And just out of, with all of us, when you understand what's coming, then you can prepare better. So just kind of, and that may be a conversation appropriate with the IAR and SAT, but I'd kind of like to know what that looks like.
We can work to share more about that. Thank you.
Karen, you want to go or you want me? Good? Okay. So I'll take us on a little walk and I will try not to repeat what many of our colleagues have already said. I'm on. Am I not close enough? Sorry. All right, there we go. So I just want to highlight a few things just to make sure that I have clear understanding, but then also that anybody who's interested in this deep dive into data also understands. When we talk about this adaptive assessment, if you can flip to that slide, this is personally what I really like about this assessment is that this type of adaptive assessment pinpoints pretty much exactly where each individual student is in their learning when it comes to attaining the learning objectives that were set forth, whether it be in reading or math. And what that helps us do as educators is identify those gaps that might exist due to whatever happened in the world or that child's world, that, maybe they're on step 3, but they missed step 2, and that's going to maybe have a negative impact on their learning in the next grade, right, when they have those gaps. So this type of assessment helps us identify those gaps and then work in the structures that you so nicely articulated to make sure that students have those filled as they move forward through their coursework. So I thought it was important to highlight that. Same thing with Courtney. I very quickly picked up on the achievement of the 2nd grade, and I don't want to pass these slides without mentioning, these numbers at even as low as 69.8%, but as high as, 86.6% in kindergarten, that these are 86.6%. These numbers mean, if you go 2 slides forward, that 80 whatever percent of our students are performing at average or above, which is a high percentage. 79, 80, 77, 77, 82, all across. Now, some need to focus some efforts, and this is pretty standard across the board, I think, in schools and education, is our subgroups when it comes to IEP, EL, FRL, and district. Well, forget district, that's a big number of the entire district, sorry. But our subgroups is what I think I heard you all focusing on to provide more support and figure out where the learning is for those students and give them what they need to move forward, right? So that's really nice focus for the team. I was happy to hear that you were focusing on that. I do agree with Jim and a couple other colleagues on having the past performance available so that we can look at comparisons and growth over time. But I do also want to go on to your growth projections that are here and just kind of reiterate what I'm understanding. Tell me if I'm wrong. So as we move from 1st to 8th grade, we're starting to see, we go from large growth projections in 1st grade to very small growth projections as you inch towards 8th grade. And that's because those students are already achieving at or above grade level. So we're seeing smaller growth projections because they're already achieving at or above grade level. Which means when we look at the green line, and although I do see it 1 and 2 points lower in grades 1 and 2, like Courtney talked about, and even 3 at times, our kids are actually growing at a faster rate than projected by the assessment.
That is correct. We have re-examined this slide in 4 different formats because I think prior it wasn't an accurate depiction of what's taking place, and it's a difficult point to communicate. So I do agree, and I appreciate you pointing out it's the growth projections that are less as those high achieving students in upper grades grow. And again, that's not Elmhurst, that's the nation and the norm data that we receive. and that schools who use NWA MAP, which are many, also have similar slides on. So thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, let me rephrase that, Scott, because I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. Like when we're looking at fifth grade and our growth was at a 9, but we were projected at a 7.9, generally speaking, for fifth grade in Elmhurst.
Correct.
So we outpaced the projection.
Correct. So the average of all of our current fifth graders last year when they were in fourth grade, they were projected to grow. So on those reports in an average that they receive home to grow 7.9 RIT points. When in reality, as an average, this fall they grew 9 points.
Great. So I do have a question on if you move to the IAR projections, because this is where data starts to conflict a little bit. Keep going to the math side, please. So, and I'm just going to point it out because it's there, and we're looking at 8th grade, and you see that 21% level 1. So now we have this kind of projection, even though they haven't taken that assessment yet, right? What are we doing? Can you talk to us a little bit about how we take data like this and start to, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating it, but how do we start to use this so that we can minimize the potential of our students actually performing at 21% level 1?
The first step is disaggregating it further by not just grade, but school, students, specifically by demographics as we've talked about, but specifically by actual students, and sorting that at each school to see where is the need within that school. We have talked and have explained, and I think we can continue to articulate our tiers of support as well, and how that looks in different grade levels and in different experiences that the students have based on those needs. But I think the immediate answer is the continued disaggregation and breakdown of the data to make sure, as we saw in the school example in the elementary setting, what is going on in that particular section, whatever it may be in whatever grade. Who are those students by name and need? What are we doing for them? Are they in the building? What's their attendance? These sorts of questions that will come up in our PLCs as well as in our school leadership team meetings. And the team leaders are doing a great job. The principals are doing a great job with that as well. Everyone wants this data to continuously improve. So I think the short answer is continued data use on a more analytical level, but specifically by students and by the different components that relates to that student's data.
Mm-hmm. And I just appreciate what you were just leaning towards, and this was that we're talking about a potentially high-risk group of students, right, when it comes to their proficiency and achievement. And it's about knowing our students, learning their story, identifying what even outside instructionally in the classroom is happening for them in teaching and learning that might be influencing or having an impact on their ability to learn, right? And so that's when we talk about understanding the whole child and why we value our relationships with our kids and our families, and understanding where they are so that we can provide supports to, again, put them towards that path of success and achievement when it comes to school. A couple more just kind of things for the next presentation, if I can add my 2 cents on what I think would be helpful. You've talked a lot, all of you, about our MTSS and multi-tiered support systems, tier 1, 2, and 3. A brief explanation, I think, for the community of what that is and how it supports students across the board, not just a certain group of students. It's really for all students. And I think that'll help clarify what some of that instructional strategy is and curriculum piece that we implement for kids. The other might be some examples of differentiated instruction in both reading and math, maybe at different grade levels. I heard a couple colleagues asking about what specifically is happening in the classroom, so that might help us with some examples of what that looks like for teachers and students. And then the last thing is on a very big picture, just because I see high school and post-secondary indicators on our next conversation or our next meeting, which is my favorite. Yes, Kevin, you know me so well. I think to add some context about how our students are performing and looking at comparisons, not just within our own district, but other schools, might be helpful, and where we are in comparison to other schools. I think it adds context and it helps us understand the bigger picture and ultimately who our students might be up against when they're going and making post-secondary decisions. Thank you very much. It's a very thorough presentation. I look forward to the next
3 according to my dates here.
Thank you for the feedback. We absolutely will be able to include that feedback in the future, as well as the comparison data on the 15th of November, and some of the other pieces as well as it relates to the tiers and possible classroom samples. So thank you very much.
Anybody else? Karen?
I wish I didn't have anything, but we've gone on, but still other perspectives. So I'm going to start with what Kara had talked about, which you had written notes, Scott, that you would provide for us, which is, she called it reverse mapping, but I call it reverse engineering, probably because I'm a computer science person, but same concept. So just so that you have that concept out there. Because what I want to do is kind of put it in a bigger picture in my mind, and then kind of correct me if I'm wrong as I get down to more of the fine-nute details, and I'll get to an example with a student. So really what people look for in coming to a community for their family is great schools, niche. You know, traditionally it's been ACT scores out of the high school, now it's SAT, et cetera. And I know that the colleges have done different things, whether they, it's always ACT, which was made life easier for us, then they went to SAT, and now some colleges don't, you know, require any testing. And so it's not straightforward, but still, there's something that we can look for of how well are we, back to Kara's point, this is all about the students, how well are we as a system performing so that each one of our students reaches his or her potential. So I like that reverse engineering. You know, how do, you know, that's the outcome, and then back mapping it, right? You're showing with some of this data. So if we take I'll call it a year snapshot, are you saying that there's IAR and report cards that say how District 205 is doing in comparison, right? And that data is it's 6 months late, but it's only once a year, right? Okay, so that's what I call, in my world, when doing quality and business process improvement, was a lagging indicator. So how I'm putting this into perspective, and once again, correct me anytime that I'm wrong here, is that we want to know earlier where our students are with what they need to know at each grade level, no matter what the subject matter is. We happen to be highlighting math and reading, but we should be doing that for every subject matter because we test them and that sort of thing. So what we use in between this IAR stuff is the NWEA map. And we even, in our district, get down to a more minute of the particular items, let's say for literacy that Katie used as an example. There are key things, and you use examples of phonetics and, you know, sounding and words, and, you know, I'm sure at higher grade levels you're saying fluency and I forgot the words we use, but, you know, comprehension, yeah, and all those sorts of things. Okay, so we do that testing, and you use the example of foundations. I'm sure there's other things that we use. So I'm tracking it. Okay, so when we look at the comparisons, Scott, you said last year data comparison. What exact year are we talking about as a comparison?
For this presentation?
Yeah, or what so far we're thinking that we're going to compare.
So on the November 15th presentation, what we did last year, we compared ourselves to our comparable districts. So we'll look at their data that's released at that time as well. So all data across the state of Illinois will be released this year on October 27th. So that's why that presentation occurs after that date. So we will be able to have SAT comparisons, I believe 9th grade on track comparisons.
Okay, so two pieces. One is you're saying who are we going to compare ourselves to, but even the data in here, you said we were going to compare ourselves to last year. Meaning,
so in this data, the comparison was our own students.
Yeah.
So based on our own students compared from their results last year based on the national normed data that we have. So there are no students outside of our district in this data per se, with the exception of the norms, which has 11 million students within it, if that helps.
Okay.
The comparison data that I'm referencing as it relates to the 15th is you know, just to be direct, where we stand in relation to other schools,
Right.
who we typically compare ourselves to.
Right, okay. So I'm also interested in pre-COVID data, how we've done, and trends. Okay, so that's one thing. And I'm wondering, I mean, I like the fact that, you know, we're at the board level, it's district level information, but the reason why I kind of went into some of that detail of, you know, reverse engineering is that we can, I'm sure that we're looking at particular schools and classes. Let's use grade level 2. Because we're just looking at it for reading or math results for second grade. That's overall District 205. What I'm getting at is I'm sure there are some grade level 2, like either school or classrooms, that are outperforming. And so the thought being is, as we look at data, we probably can see year over year, is someone consistently helping those students? And do we look at, like, what's best practices? And can we just do something as simple as replicate those best practices? And I know that we've had previous conversations about some ways, some meetings that you're sharing, you know, having teachers share, whatever. But I'm just thinking collectively, like, that's a great thing in this process that we could be doing. And I bet you probably know.
Absolutely. I mean, as recent as today, we were in this very room with leaders from across the district, and we were looking at one another's results and various data components and talking, comparing, sharing notes, examples, strategies, et cetera. So we are absolutely working to do that as often as we can.
Yeah. Because again, it's just for the students. And it's so what works for students, you know, replicate, right? Okay, so when you reference professional development and PLCs, and Katie, you said, for example, in literacy, there's 91 sessions. Is that like different schools, or is it different topics, or just kind of a brief summary to get an idea?
I know it's a lot. It's a lot of sessions, and we can definitely follow up and share exactly what those sessions are and the topics. But I would say that at the district level, we are supporting all of those different 91 sessions that I mentioned.
Sorry, let me be clear about it. So what we're saying is there's 91 sessions. It could look like anything. But what we're trying to do is make sure that every school, every teacher, every support staff, whoever needs the training gets it. And that's why we're saying there's 91 sessions, and we're targeting it that way. Sorry, I should have just been clear and direct with the question.
Because there are so many different roles that we want to make sure are aligned to this instructional priority. We have different sessions for different folks to target that, you know, what they really need in their own development. And that's why there's so many. It's not 91 for K teachers only.
Thank you. Okay, and then just from a standpoint of following up, because I know that in the past things have been volunteer, and some things that we've done, like this process, which is so important, can be implemented, doesn't necessarily have to be implemented. And so I want to get a sense of what we're doing different, that there is follow-up, accountability, and it's not a negative thing. It's just, if we are for all the students, and what we want to do is have every student reach their potential, then we need to ensure that our people are doing that, what we think is critical, because we get their input. So it's not like we're forcing them to do something.
I can share.
Absolutely.
Can I share?
One of the examples that I was going to give is that Katie even shared with the adoption of our ELA curricular resources. we really emphasized, and we are so appreciative of the board of understanding that it wasn't just the investment in the resources, it was the investment in the people. Because the people and the execution is what really makes us critical consumers of the resources to be able to leverage them in the way. And so starting last year, after the board, literally, I think it might have been even the next day, after the board took action and allowed us to purchase those resources as well as the professional development, we actually bought cohorts of teachers together at the same grade level right here in this room and provided professional development prior to them even receiving the resources. And what we did was we took advantage of the actual optimal moment, which is during the learning day. And so we bought them in. We, with the support of our board, we were able to then ensure that instruction was taking place back at the ranch in those classrooms, having subs and working and rotating, and then having those teachers together. That has continued. And so what we also want to notice is in our professional development plan, it's all aligned to our instructional priorities. So those 91 sessions are how are we building capacity internally around the areas that we've identified and we focused on, which is also a little bit of a precursor for the work that we want to do within our math and across our math system from K to 12.
All right.
I would just add the intentionality that Dr. Campbell alluded to and explained is in such need. We realized during COVID how much more intentional we want to be and need to be as a result. Our planning now, and we are not pulling people out of their building unless it's absolutely aligned and there are outcomes that will be cyclical. We've gotten very, very focused on that. We've gotten strong feedback from that. So I do think the intentionality is stronger than before. With no regard to the past, it's not to say that it wasn't there, but I know that COVID-19 forced us to absolutely be intentional and focused on what we're doing and why we're doing it.
Okay, two last questions. If you look at the observed growth slides, it shows us what's happening. But my question is, what would we expect? So your example or your response, Scott, was, I think it was fifth grade. Where are you reading? Yeah. Where our fourth graders, when they were fourth graders, they were projected to have observed growth at fifth grade at 7.9, and they really got 9. So that's just like what's happening. So my question is, that's what's happening, but what would we expect it to be? And you don't have to answer it now, but that's a good question for us to ask if you're looking at these sorts of things, because you'll get what you get, but if you expect something, you will get something greater.
Absolutely.
When you're looking at metrics.
Our expectations are high. We obviously want all of our students to surpass their projected growth, without a doubt. In terms of where would we expect them to be, where we are told by the norm data they should be is that blue column. That doesn't mean that that is something we're satisfied with in any way, shape, or form, but we are definitely looking at those, points of pride and seeing how can we learn from those and support other areas where we know we can continuously improve as well.
Yeah. So here's an example, right? So in COVID, we know that there was learning loss. And so what, the fourth grader would expect to achieve in grade 5 is, what that is. And awesome that they achieve more. But what we'd want to do is, right, we want to say, what did they miss during COVID? And let's close that gap as quickly as we can, right? Because they're not staying back at that grade 2 grades ago, pre-COVID. So that's what really, gets me thinking about what would we expect, because then that also provides the support of what's the gap, how, is there a way to close that gap as fast as you can so that student reaches their potential and doesn't lose a year or 2. Okay. Last question. So we have this data, and I know that we can look at it per program, let's say. But I'm trying to look at it from a lens of dual language, because we have just, recently deployed dual language still, because we haven't gotten it all to all the grades to see how it's affecting the students through District 205. So what's the lens, or how do we look at it from dual language? Or can we not?
Yes, absolutely. We can look at that. We can look at demographic groupings, of course, but we also are looking at the data in different schools as well as through different programmatic lenses. So that data is definitely being disaggregated and reviewed and analyzed and used in plans as well.
Okay, so thank you for the presentation and the really good discussion. When we see that some of our students aren't meeting benchmarks, I think we all want to laser focus in on what would help them meet benchmarks. But I also want to acknowledge that 80% of our students are reading achieved at or above grade level, correct? Met or achieved above the standard.
Yes.
And 78% in math, met or exceeded. And so while there's a group that we want to make sure their needs are being met so they can, grow to meet those standards, I do want to acknowledge that that is a nice percentage. So, okay.
Thank you
there's
all.
nothing
Appreciate
else.
it.
Then we will move on to the K through 12 math instructional review.
Thank you. So as we discussed in September's Learning Together presentation, our math instructional priority and its accompanying professional learning plan really allows us an opportunity to evaluate K-12 math instruction and curricular materials in all our classrooms. And so over the course of the last month, we've done some research, and we're excited about a potential opportunity to partner with New Teacher Center, or NTC, to perform that comprehensive K-12 math instructional review to be completed this year. So to provide some context about where we're headed, I wanted to first highlight where we've been as it relates to our math instructional practices and curriculum materials. So Eureka math materials are utilized in all K through 8 classrooms and were adopted by the district in 2017-2018 with really the intention to support the transition to the Common Core state standards and the accompanying key shifts in mathematics, those being focus, coherence, and rigor. It is also, many districts do a program review of their curricular materials after 5 to 6 years of implementation. And so this provides that opportunity, but also expands it to really look at the instructional practices and how we're utilizing that material. Our middle schools and high school, again, leveraging this idea of us being a unit district, are continuing to collaborate to ensure that algebra and geometry courses are aligned and providing students with a similar experience. Whether you take that course at one of our 3 middle schools or at York, we want to make sure that we're providing the same rigorous experience. As it relates to our summative assessment data, students continue to demonstrate proficiency in math above the state average, but there are opportunities to elevate math instruction across all grade levels and increase the student achievement and growth. And so last year, in an effort to identify opportunities to elevate instruction and promote student outcomes, our Learning and Teaching Department engaged in program reviews focused on K-5 ELA and also 6-12 World Language. And so the focus for this year would be K-12 mathematics. And in order to complete a review of this scope and scale in our timeline of it happening this year, we are seeking outside support. So as we look at what this instructional review entails, the proposed review items include co-observations in classrooms K-12. So this would be partnering with district and building leaders to have half-day classroom walkthroughs using a common instructional practice guide to collect data across all 12 schools to really identify trends. This also gives the opportunity to collect student work samples and identify what curricular materials are actually being used in classrooms. So if there are supplemental materials being utilized, we can see that in action. It also includes facilitated focus groups with students, parents, and educators and school leaders, and we will likely be supporting that and building those out as well to ensure that if people are interested in participating in those focus groups, we have enough of them. But that will definitely give us a standardized template and way to collect that data, and that's really focused on what is the perceived rigor of academics in our math classrooms and that experience that our students are having when they're experiencing math, again, from kindergarten all the way through their senior year of high school. It also provides the opportunity to complete a materials and student work review. So highlighted this, some of those materials will be collected in classroom observations and then also collected at the district level of what we provide educators. But really, again, the focus of this is to see, are the materials aligned to grade level standards and content and career readiness standards? And so making sure that those materials are at that caliber. Also included in that is a comprehensive data review. So this includes any data that we would like to highlight. So again, looking at student work and going off of the example that Katie walked through of the school looking at literacy curriculum, right? Actually looking at some classroom-based assessments while also utilizing those summative assessments that we highlight in here. And then finally, it would end in a culminating strategy setback session. And this is where we will engage building, teacher leaders, building administrators, district administrators to really take a step back, look at what we've identified and plan next steps. So some of the questions that we're going to be looking at and getting recommendations from NTC on is what is contributing to or hindering our students' academic achievement? What are the concrete actions the district will take to realize its vision for math instruction? What core actions should we focus on in the coming month, right? So really taking this comprehensive review and then putting it into action. So this is just an example. This is not District 205. They provided us a sample report, but this is just the level of detail that we'll be able to receive from this review. And so as you can see in this slide, it says most, again, this is not District 205, but most math lessons are aligned to grade level content, but not the required rigor. So it's really going beyond the curricular materials to see implementation. We know materials matter, right? But that instruction and that implementation by the teacher is crucial. And so we want to make sure that we're able to identify how we can best support teachers in their instructional implementation of our math resources. So currently we are not on pause on math, right? Last month we highlighted our key focus of executing instruction that meets the demands of grade level standards and provides opportunities for enrichment and intervention that coherently links standards within and across grades. So really focused on that key shift about coherence and supporting students to be able to link previous content to what they're currently learning and fill in any gaps that they need. And so that's the learning that's currently going on around math, our math priority. But our proposed timeline for the math instructional review is we're presenting it today for hopefully board approval in November, then providing in early January those co-observations and focus groups and having the opportunity for those in-person interactions to then have them compile all the information and data for that strategy setback session in March, by the end of March. And that really provides us with enough time, right, to action plan. So action plan for any end of year learning going into summer, but then also a cohesive professional learning plan for our math classrooms starting in August 2023 for potentially multi-year learning. Any questions?
Okay, questions? Thank you. Questions? Chris?
Yeah, so my main question is just does using a service like this have a track record? Do these folks have a track record of moving the needle for the kids if you implement the recommendations?
Yes. So that's why we selected this particular group. One, because they could provide, right, this scope of work on a timeline that let us move in the direction of having a professional learning plan. But they did also, and we can share those out potentially, but they did also share, you know, their kind of case studies and research that and successes they've shared with how implementing their recommendations and next steps has increased student outcomes. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, I think just seeing the outcomes would be helpful before we vote on it. As a follow-up, thank you.
Courtney?
Just 2 questions. Do we know the cost? Did I miss that in the presentation? Okay. I didn't miss it, or we don't know?
You did not miss it
Okay.
in the presentation.
Don't
We are
know?
just bringing this for
Okay.
discussion and exploration from our board. But there is a cost.
Yeah, well, I figured. There's always a cost, but it would be great to have an idea of, you know, kind of what we're talking about.
Do you want me to? Okay. So the proposed cost is
Somebody tell me how much it's going to cost.
the proposed cost, it's in the memo as well, but the proposed
Okay.
cost is
I see, I did miss it.
$47,000.
I'm sorry.
$47,000.
And then can you, I love the aggressive timeline, right? That to me, if Chris went with Chris, in combination with Chris's question, the answers to that, I love that. Can you give the community an idea of how long this would take if we did not use a service and we undertook this on our own?
Sure. So I think last year's program reviews that we did with K-5 literacy and then 6-12 world language give that was a year-long process just to really dig deep, right, and identify next steps in a professional learning plan for K-5, right? And Katie did a fabulous job of looking K-12 and then prioritizing K-5 when she came in, but this would definitely be a multi-year process if we were going to handle it internally and think through and bucket it by grade level is probably the approach that would be taken.
Thank you.
Yeah.
As part of this, will they be looking at our students and their needs as far as maybe study skills that they may have or not have, supports that we have or maybe need more of in our schools to address any, you know, if they have questions or they're falling behind or they need to get help, will that be part of the review as well to make sure that we have in place what the students need and enough of that to serve all of our students so that they can get help within our district when they need it as much as possible?
Absolutely. So there was another piece of feedback I know about looking at our course sequence in math and getting input on that. And so I've definitely noted that as something that we'd like to share. The data review really leaves it open to what information we're looking for. So we can certainly build out some, you know, MTSS, provide them with our MTSS structures and how we're identifying students for those tiered supports to get feedback about that as well. That's a great call out.
I like the opportunity to look at the Eureka map now that we've been using it for a few years and our teachers have been using it. So it's nice to be able to circle back and assess that. Thank you.
I'll just piggyback on that. Is that all right, Jim? Sorry. Great time, 5 years into Eureka Math to review and take a look at how it's serving our students. Another thing maybe to consider is what any shifts in the pathway and the math pathways might do for college and career readiness. We know a high percentage of our kids are going to college and we want to make sure doors are opening, specifically when it comes to a core competency like mathematics, and that the rigor is there, that our students have the opportunity, those who can be successful in high rigor classes, right, have the opportunity to experience those in their math life here in our district.
Absolutely.
Jim.
So in your presentation, you're recommending one firm. How many firms did you look at?
We reached out to 3 and then we followed up with 2 after we described what we were interested in and what they were able to provide.
Okay. What are the qualifications of this firm that you're recommending?
I think it's it's a good balance of what, first of all, a proven track record, right? So we'll get you their information around that. But also, they provided a level of flexibility to really tailor it to what we needed, right? Again, going back to that data review, looking at our course scope and sequence, you know, have it coming in and walking classrooms alongside of us, and really also bringing along District 205 administrators in the process. Another group we looked at, you know, said we come in and we do it individually, and then we kind of just give you the report. And so that didn't feel as collaborative. And when we're thinking about carrying out the work in a multi-year approach, we really wanted to be alongside them.
So of the two firms that we talked to, one would work alongside of us and one would not. Why can't we do this internally? What would prevent us from doing that?
So currently, the kind of our timeline and the scope of doing a comprehensive K-12 curriculum and instructional practice review would require us to, it would take multiple years. And so we're trying to take a step back and really look at ourselves as a unit district. And so that's why we're proposing bringing in additional support, because we just don't have the staffing to do that in a single year.
So let me preface my next statement by saying, if you ask me for specifics, I can't give you any until I spend more time with their sample report. But when I read it, I was kind of underwhelmed by their level of sophistication.
Okay. I would love to follow up and see when you do have more time to review the report, so then we can kind of talk through those specifics to see if there's, to see if I can go back to them and see if there's shifts they can make.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
Okay.
Do you have some? Go ahead. Okay, I'll ask. So a couple things. One, and this is more just things, I guess, that I think about that I would like to make sure are addressed, and maybe they're already part of it, and I feel like I've read the memo twice, and I probably still am going to ask something that's in there. So I'm sorry in advance. But I guess, you know, something that I would like to really know about is, do we get, you know, how many kids do we get through, I think it's Algebra 2 maybe, you know, like the courses that really say, hey, if you complete this course, most likely you will be successful in college. And how many kids are we getting through those math classes? Secondly, how does our math sequence align with SAT? Because I know that a few years ago, a change was made to put like geometry at 8th grade for you know, higher level math students. And I think, and at that time we were taking ACT as a district. So now that we're SAT, how does the math sequence align so that our students, two things. One, are covering what they need to cover, again, kind of back to the back mapping, by the time they get to the SAT. But also, if they're advanced, is some of the math on the ACT so far, you know, they've taken it so early that by the time they get to the SAT, there's a little bit of a gap in, you know, so just that alignment piece. And then also, what are really, you know, support structures that are effective. So, you know, we just looked at our math, you know, it was a little bit lower than our reading, but I think also at the high school, you know, what are effective supports? So yes, we have a math lab, but what does it look like in the math lab to really effectively support students? And are there other supports that are needed that look different or are new, or a different way to think about how we support kids in math. Because I think, especially after the pandemic, we're gonna, the high school, the upper grades, there's, they lost. And so there's gonna be that, ooh, I don't know how to do this, and where do they get support? So I don't know if that's probably already something that would be part of this audit, but those are things that I think, we always look at the final outcome, but all those little pieces are what strengthen the experience. And in addition to, I'd really like to know the Eureka Math, how it's going. All right, Karen?
Can I just add one thing to what Kara was saying, and that is similar to what I was saying earlier, but the supports in place, and as part of maybe the community input, we could find out how many of our students are needing out or getting outside support, and if there's a way that we can help to pull that back in a little bit maybe and try to offer those supports within our buildings so that we don't have so many students needing to do that.
Absolutely.
Okay. So I'm trying to understand what the difference that we're looking for, that we're saying we need an outside firm, versus when we were presented the Eureka Math, it was very different. The presentation, not just the literal presentation, but it was a new process as to how we were going to be looking at new programs, et cetera, like a Eureka Math for our district. And it was, and I'll use, Keisha's Plan, Do, Check, Act, and that we really had a discussion at the board table about it's the process that we're going to be using, not just the materials. And some examples were talked about in depth, which was, and I'm going to use my terms, I don't remember what Dave and the company used, but it was more the face-to-face, more direct training. It was, going out to the schools, meeting with everybody at the schools. He was even in classrooms with teachers, recognition, the whole thing. And also it was, how are we going to review it in that check, adjust? So I would like to understand what of that we've done and how that would play into what you are expecting, and to see what that gap is, because I'm a little confused by this ask based on that discussion and, everything that happened after that. So I'd like to see what the, the gap.
Just so to be clear in your ask, so you want to know what has already been in place as it relates to the review of the adoption of Eureka?
And it sounds like professional learning that accompanied it.
Just, right.
It's just, we were, it wasn't just this is new materials, but it was, Dave personally was training, trained trainers, it was a different approach. It was more making sure everyone got trained, and it was reviewing how is it providing the outcomes that we expected. So I think that's a good question leading into if we use a firm or not. So that's my major thing. I was kind of caught off guard that this was coming forward. I definitely like Chris's question about the proven track record of the firm, if we go down that path. But I have a bigger question that you got. Keisha nailed it. And then how have other districts done their review that they've implemented this Eureka Math? Because it sounded as though it was something different. I don't know if we were uniquely going to implement it different or whether it was just this new approach.
just because I wasn't here
Yeah,
when
yeah,
that
yeah.
happened.
Yeah, yeah.
We can work to get that information for you, absolutely, though. But we can look at, what onboarding they did, what professional learning they did, and kind of throughout that progress. We can
Okay.
absolutely get that for you.
Okay. And then for me, there's a sweet spot of choosing a firm that tailors to what we need. But really, I mean, we need them for their expertise, not just extra
personnel.
Yeah, head count, right? I mean, there's, so I would want you to really think about that. And that would get to the, proven track record. And yeah, more information that we've got to give us a sense of these things. And then the last piece would be, what are we going to learn from that review so that we really can do that plan, do, check, act with math, with reading, with science, with literature, whatever we deploy, because, we went from curriculum coordinators to curriculum directors, we have department heads, we've got, you know what I mean? The two of you in, making sure that it's all coming together as well as some consistency across. And so I'm trying to see what's the difference of hiring somebody versus kind of what we're trying to create here.
Absolutely. I think that's the focus of even one of our strategic objectives and what you will hear now is in the life cycle of our organization, as what has been mentioned, there have been initiatives and programs that have been implemented. And in the life cycle of an organization, we have to pause every now and then. And I think of 4 to 5 years, a really great target with that. That's why most strategic plans are that length, to say, based on what we've implemented and based on the desired outcomes, what has gotten us closer or even surpassed those benchmarks and outcomes, and what has not, what has been the barriers. And so I really appreciate this idea, and you are going to see this more and more with this particular organization, with this particular leadership team, is making sure that what we already have in place is getting us to our intended outcomes that we want. And if not, how do we identify them? Particularly in the K-5 situation, it really elevated this idea of us really looking at the resources that we were actually putting in the hands of teachers, and how are we supporting them based on the identification of where some of our students were stagnant in outcome data. I think that what you will now see is that process is going to be replicated across various initiatives that have already been adopted. I think we are elevating now. We mentioned we started off with our core subject areas coming out of the pandemic. That was a focus. So we started off with ELA. We identified that our K-5 was really the important key lever to start that. Now we're moving to math. I'm going to be honest with you. You're going to probably hear very soon about us looking at our EL and doing a review of our dual language program. So it's really taking a moment to say there are things that we have done as a district, and I appreciate the commitment of our district to put programs and supports in place to meet the very diverse needs of all of our students. But within that, we got to always pause and to say, and I think right now, currently, we run a very lean administrative team. I want to be clear on that. We run a very lean administrative team. There is an opportunity where we could pull internal resources to do this work. But then my question is, at what cost? What then is not being done? You just heard us say that we have 91 professional development sessions that are being led, all by the administrators in this district. We have not asked to bring out any outsource, particularly outside of our curricular resources, but that's being led, that's being developed. We are now working more collaboratively with our school, in a greater collaboration and alignment with our school teams. The level of oversight, we've identified now pathways and really looking strategically across what's happening in our middle school and how is the learning experience in our middle school is supporting our students in our high school. So now we are currently bringing teams across middle school and high school together. All of that work is happening concurrently while we want someone to pause and say, based on your K-12 math experience, what are the opportunities for us to further push? And so that's the actual tension here, is the urgency that's been elevated with us wanting to really accelerate the outcomes for our students. And how do we do that while we are currently have a plan in place implementing high level of professional development, aligning that with our instructional priority, as well as now also thinking about what's on the horizon for next year and the following year to make sure that those outcomes continue to be met. So I really appreciate the conversation and dialogue, and I just want you all to know that you're probably going to hear more of this, more of let's pause, more of how do we know it's working, more of what can we do differently, more of, you know, the supports. And I think with our strategic plan, we oftentimes think resources of adding people. I want to pause and say, how can we potentially, is it maybe redistributing resources we already have? Maybe it is a lack of needing additional resources, but before we come with any type of recommendation or ask, I just want us to have the data to know how is this helping us get closer to our intended outcomes for students. Thank you for the conversation, though.
Can I add something to that, Keisha? The takeaway for me is absolutely around, you know, we just spent quite a bit of time looking over our data and how our kids are performing. We're looking at ELA, reading, and math. And these are the efforts that school districts engage in order to ensure that student potential is maximized, that we have pathways in our curriculum for all students, and that we that the curriculum is the right fit for where we are right now, because we are in an ever-changing educational environment. Over the last 5 to 10 years, education has changed drastically. And so this constant review, and I'm glad to hear you say that this is a process that the district and team will be going through, and you mentioned the EL program. We just did this with reading. It's a strong approach, in my personal opinion, to ensuring that we're giving students, that we're delivering the service that our community expects our schools to deliver to our children. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Also, I think that there may be, after the review, maybe we will find that we need to add people in certain areas. But I appreciate that before adding people, without knowing exactly where we need them, this gives us the opportunity to invest in professionals that are experts in this area to do the work that we need to get done while we're doing all the other work that we all find extremely important for our students. And then just to clarify, the curriculum piece is a really large piece of this, but there are a lot of other things also. It's not just a curriculum review, it's a lot of other parts as well.
That is absolutely correct. And really the pairing of not only just the curriculum resources, but the pedagogical, the instructional practices, the structures that's going with it, the data that's being collected, what are we seeing, right? And so it's really looking at across all of the intersectionalities of those things that provide a high quality learning experience for our students in our classroom. That's the lever to achievement. It's about what happens every day in the classroom between the professionals and the experts with students, and every student is different, as we've seen in our data earlier. What works for one student is not going to work. That's what makes education so complex. Yeah. That's why we call teaching an art. That's why we need various data points, because it's not one particular data point that tells the totality of the story of a child. So it's bringing all of that together, then also utilizing the collective efficacy, the internal brain power and trust is why you all were so wise to invest in time for PLCs, late starts. Now we're saying, how are we utilizing those structures in a very intentional way, aligned with an instructional priority, as well as constant review and progress monitoring towards an intended goal. That's the work of a high and functioning school organization, period, point blank. And that's what we're doing, and that's what we're going to continue to do, and that's why we're going to continue to serve our students well.
Yep. So I think that it would be valuable to see what's the difference of when we implement something new. What is our plan, do, check, act with that, as well as the bigger picture review? Because I don't want us to wait to 5 years to say whether that was, the whole point is that we were going to do this review. We were going to get how well is it going, how this is, what is impacting our students, to your point, and not waiting 5 years for each one of these programs. So there's that balancing, short-term, long-term balance. And then lastly,
I'm assuming that it's reviewing Eureka Math. I'm hoping that it's reviewing the levels of math because we've made changes. We've gone from a few to a lot to maybe medium levels of math throughout our sequencing, especially when you get to middle school and high school. And then so that's the levels and the sequencing and, how kids can, as the light bulb goes off for them in their learning, that they can go up. Or if they went up too high, that they can come back just one step, not several steps, and how all of that plays a part. Because I know, to Kara's point, we moved geometry from high school to middle school, but then we noticed that the students weren't prepared for algebra, and they didn't have, so we had to build up algebra. So all of those things that we've been doing, I'm hoping that this review would include that, and we will now then have an assessment of what that means for us in even those specific things. So what we've done, what the data has shown or not shown, and then what your action is. Okay.
Absolutely. And we'll look at, a couple people have brought it up, but looking at students who participate in different pathways, double acceleration, single acceleration, and seeing student outcomes aligned with that, whether that's IAR, SAT, but really seeing, are we getting the results that we expect through that? And that's why we are excited about the K-12 approach, because we get to see all those pieces past Eureka, for instance.
And just to I think you said this, but just reiterate. So essentially, we could do it ourselves, but it would take us 2 years.
I would say it would be
Or
it would be a multi-year process.
Okay, multi-year.
Yeah,
Okay,
multi-year
so
process.
multi-year. So multi-year to get the audit done before we can actually
implement.
This would accelerate that to get done by the spring, so that action could be taken to implement next year.
Yes.
Is that?
Yep.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I had that correct. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. All right. Moving on then, 2023-2024 course proposals.
Okay, I'm going to continue. So, same voice. So I am here to talk through York's course proposals for next year. So the course proposals are being proposed this year for implementation next year. So just some background around the process that we go through for the course proposals. We start this as early as the spring prior, with creating a common location for all our materials. The assistant principal of instruction, Dr. Rubacek, leads the process at the high school in collaboration with our division chairs and then also our learning and teaching directors. So if you're looking at course proposals, there's a call out for who was involved in that process, and you'll see district office employees, administrators, and teachers from the building as well. And so that process goes through them brainstorming any potential needs or shifts that they see in courses at the high school, then going through completing the thorough course proposal process. Those go then to the principal and myself to review prior to presenting to cabinet. And so we are here to present them to you, answer any questions you have, with the hope that those could be approved as courses for next year on November 15th. Our instructional materials review, so this does not include the instructional materials for these courses. Some of them have, like a Project Lead the Way course has an outlined curriculum that accompanies it. But if we were going to get any textbooks or anything like that, that would go through that instructional review materials process that we start in February, just to highlight that for your approval. So for next year, we currently have 4 courses that we're proposing. And so I'm just going to go through the table and talk through each one. Our first course is Project Lead the Way, and it's Engineering, Design, and Development, an honors level course. And it's replacing the Architectural Drafting STEM applications. The purpose for this is we have been creating a Project Lead the Way pathway starting in middle school all the way through high school. And this is that capstone course for the Project Lead the Way course scope and sequence. And so again, this is replacing that course, that architectural drafting and STEM course. It provides a lot of student autonomy and student choice where they're designing and developing using the engineering process a problem that they identify themselves. Our second course, new course, is Journalism and New Media. This is replacing the Journalism and Broadcast Communications entry-level courses for those pathways. So currently you either take a journalism course if you're interested in going through more print journalism courses at York, or you enter broadcast communications, which then takes you into the YTV and broadcasting pathway. So this proposal has a single prerequisite course that is more of a survey course that allows students to experience both pathways so they can determine whether they're interested then in going to a second level course in print journalism or in broadcasting, depending on their interests after getting exposure to both. Our third course that we're proposing is Advanced Placement Spanish Literature and Culture. So currently York's capstone course in Spanish is AP Spanish Language. Because our middle school language provides students the opportunity to enter York at a third level Spanish, this would then be the capstone course or the 6th year course for students who are choosing to take 4 years of Spanish. It's an advanced placement course, and again, it would come after AP Spanish Language for those students who selected to take the accelerated middle school world language pathway in Spanish. The last course that we are proposing is the Business Accelerator course, also an honors level course. And this course is a 2nd year course for our Business Incubator course. That has been a wildly popular course at York. And so when surveying students, many students, especially in their students who were selecting to take the course in their junior year, said they would be interested in taking the next level course if it were available. And so we're providing a proposal for the 2nd level course in the incubator series as well. And that covers the 4 courses.
Okay, thanks. All right, questions? Athena?
I have one or two.
Mm-hmm.
First, around just current numbers of students in those pathways that you identified, and then creating a secondary option or a capstone course. So specifically in Spanish, how many kids are on that track that you just discussed, where they come in with 3 years and then go for an additional 4? What's your potential class there? And the reason why I'm asking, and it's really for all these courses, is just around, I'd hate to have a situation, I'm supportive of all 4 of these courses, by the way, let me put that out there, and them being approved. But I'd hate to create a scenario where we don't have enough enrollment and then we have nowhere for kids to go.
And so that's a great question. There aren't any FTE implications of this, right? So those students would normally be going into an AP Spanish language class, so there would be an additional section of that, but they will have already taken that their junior year. And so for that one in particular, we looked at how many current sophomores there are in that level of Spanish, and there's currently, I think, 25, and we are anticipating that most of them would return for a 4th year of Spanish. And so it would be a single section. Teacher interest is high. So no FTE implications, but anticipating 1 section. We did only propose the Spanish course because some of our other languages where students might be on those accelerated pathways don't have the number of students who continued with that same language, right? They might have transitioned to a new language when they went to York. And so those we aren't proposing the 4th year, because if there are a few students, we'll be able to find a partnership with a college or university, or provide some sort of independent study option.
I think it's great. And going back to, again, our first presentation of tonight, when we talk about sealed by literacy next week, and that being an indicator, this is a pathway to bringing more students and then increasing the potential for student growth in that area. So I like to see that comprehensive kind of tie of curriculum and offerings to the goals that we're setting forth when it comes to student proficiency and achievement and growth. Very good. And I did have another technical question, just about, because I see these elective courses, right? Project Lead the Way, Journalism, News, Media, and Business Accelerator. How do we distinguish or decipher the honors level? What's the difference?
That's a great question. So currently, courses like Project Lead the Way are an honors pathway, right? So it sometimes starts, so some, as if you have students at York, right? Some courses have a general level and an honors level. Students self-select into those. And then some courses, for instance, like Project Lead the Way, are an honors level course. And that's really done in collaboration with the assistant principal of instruction and the division chair to identify the rigor of the course and the appropriate leveling.
Okay, for the student placement,
Mhm.
right? So we're talking about rigor of course, potentially like homework and other
Yes.
factors that would come into play to give it the honors distinguished level. Okay, got it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
No problem.
Just a couple quick things. I think we talked a lot about kids being able to experience all of the things they want to and the things they're passionate about and reaching their goals. And these classes are more ways for our students to do that. So I love that. Doing the college application process back to back with two of my kids. I've noticed that these are things that colleges are looking for. And I've seen some of the courses, even Project Lead the Way, they're asking about that. And, you know, it's just experiences that our students can talk more about when they're going through that process. And it gives them an opportunity to have a little bit of background in a major and be able to speak to that when they're applying to colleges. So I like that part of it as well. So thank you.
Absolutely. We actually are strategically naming our Project Lead the Way courses because it is so recognized by colleges as increasing the rigor of your transcript and strength of your transcript. So we're making sure that all our Project Lead the Way courses indicate that it's a Project Lead the Way course for that very reason.
That's great.
Excellent. I just want to give a shout out to our board members for making direct and indirect connections to our strategic objectives and priorities. So you all rock so hard because that's the whole purpose of that, right? For us now to have some clarity as to what it is that we're prioritizing, what do we want to do around those priorities, and you're already seeing the natural alignment to the decisions that we're bringing forth with courses, with reviews and resources, all in that way. So I just wanted to say thank you all for that.
Anything else? Oh, Jim.
Three quick things. In the future, can we get a little more information about each of these courses? If a syllabus hasn't been developed, I understand that, but somebody's thought about the course more than just the title. So can you tell us what, in the future, what the main objectives of these courses are, what student population it serves, how big you expect perhaps enrollment to be, and you know, what are the main topics that will be covered in the course? That would be extremely helpful in the approval process. Point number two, from a very practical standpoint, thank you for having that final sixth year, or as you look at it from the high school level, fourth year Spanish class. A good friend of mine's daughter was informed by the University of Illinois her senior year that she would not be able to graduate without, and she had taken every Spanish class District 205 had to offer. But only because she was so advanced, only 3 of those classes occurred at York High School, even though she had taken whatever it was, 5 or 6 years of Spanish. University of Illinois' answer to her was, yeah, you took a lot of Spanish, but not actually in your high school. So we'll be requiring you, now this is a kid who hasn't taken Spanish in 3 years, we'll be requiring you to take Spanish for your senior year if you want to graduate. That is a horrible situation for a kid to end up in. So thank you for offering that class. And then do you have any idea how Business Incubator Honors differs from the first Business Incubator course? I don't know what
I do.
Sure.
What do they do a second time around?
What, would you like to answer?
No, I'm so excited because of this, because then I think my junior, who's in Business Incubator right now and who is debating taking it again next year because he was enjoying it so much, was part of the discussion about this follow-up course,
Mhm.
is that this first incubator is the development of the pitch and what that business would look like. And the second year goes into the practicality of actually making that pitch or that idea into a business, like taking it next level is what that's as much as a 16-year-old boy I was pretty happy could give me. So
Would
I'm
he
very
like to
excited
take
about
over?
this. I love this program. I love this pathway. And I'm just, I think that's what. Is that
Yes.
right?
So the first year course culminates in a pitch where the collaborative teams, right, have worked all year to create a pitch. If they are chosen to get funded, whether that's actually funded, right, through the organization they pitch to, or just chosen to move on, then they will continue building out that business plan in the second year. If they are choosing to take the course, but their pitch maybe didn't make it, they will then be joining another team, and that team can choose to have them be the first employee. They can say, you get 10% of our profits, right? So really modeling that process of developing a business for students. And so it builds directly upon that as well. And that's another recognized program by colleges. And so showing that it's aligned with the incubator course series.
Can I add? We have we've been patiently waiting on this one for about 2 years now. If I could remind you, the Croy Railway Group was our student group that worked heavily as a first pitch team winner. When they had that opportunity to have that second year with us not having the course in development, which was very justified at the time. We were just new with Incubator. We found a creative way to have staff members support and work with those students. But now that it's grown and we have such creative entrepreneurial ideas, there is a real strong case for this course to exist. And I think it's going to really create some awesome opportunities for our students and some really exciting things. I'm looking at Croy's website right now, and just to see where these, I call them young students have grown. It's amazing. So it's really, I think, going to be a great addition. And we've been very critical of the requests in the past, just based on the newness of the program. But I think it's really going to be a great addition.
How many sections of Business Incubator 1 are there?
There's currently one teacher, so there's 5 sections. And so we would the anticipated sections for this are either a stacked course where it's happening simultaneously, or an additional course and offering 4 sections.
Thank you.
And we will, to your feedback, we'll also add an intended audience to the course proposal in the future. I know we have standards, essential questions, and unit topics, but we'll add that intended audience, or what students it's explicitly targeting for next year.
That'd be great.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And just for community members, listening in the memo that was public, if you click on the links, there's pretty detailed information about the course. And so that the presentation was very high level, but the memo had the links that has very detailed information about the course if anybody in the community wants to know a little bit more. So, all right, any other questions?
So I understand, we're approving the course, and then after the course approval happens, then we get to approve the syllabus and the course materials, and that information is provided to the community at a later date.
Yeah, so any new instructional materials will go through that instructional materials process that'll be presented to you and then adopted after your approval.
Great. So just because it's not in here doesn't mean it's not going to happen after the course is approved.
Yes, the first step is for us to get it approved, so then we start building out those.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Can I just add for clarity that, on that link that Kara was talking about, there's a curricular overview, there's a course description. It's pretty detailed in there, and it explains a lot of what you would see in a syllabus. When it comes to the curriculum outline, what it doesn't maybe show is some of the materials that would be then approved at a later date anyway, right? So.
Can I add, we revitalized this program, the course proposal process procedurally in September of 2020. It's come a very long way. It's very detailed, very structured and sequenced. We modeled it off of, frankly, competing districts. and we can definitely review it and take a look at it. I do want to clarify, the Board of Ed approves the courses as well as then the instructional materials, should there be any. One of the challenges with developing things as detailed as a syllabus is we don't have access to course materials in some of these actual programs. So PLTW, for example, we will need to gain those materials from PLTW after the course is approved. Accelerator is very similar. We will pay $2,500 for a nominal fee. We will then have access to their curriculum materials, which will be used to design the syllabus. The syllabus will then be posted online for the public to see, but we really sequentially cannot do that work until that course is approved, which we're also up against a deadline, which we're not in any race of, to make sure we have it approved in time for student course selection. So I just want to, we've really worked on this over the last 2 years to make sure it's an improvement. And York's been really great in making sure that they, help and support us with it. So just want to highlight that.
Cool. Could I ask one little thing when you come back? I know. Just, could you remind, when we talk about pathways, could you just put what the language pathway is? Like where, like what the course, like the sequence of courses that
absolutely.
come before this one?
What is the PLTW
Yeah.
capstone?
Do you mind? Just,
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
just just for my own recollection of what that pathway is. So, okay.
Not a problem.
Thanks. All right. Anything else? All right. Nations plan update.
So I guess, Tanya, we're not going to be able to do the 50-slide presentation that we rehearsed in cabinet meeting. So can you, so just for the sake of our board, I don't think, look at the looks, I don't think they can do the 50 slides. So can you maybe dig deep and pull out the 25-slide presentation?
We will talk fast.
Okay.
We
No.
will speak quickly. So thank you very much for letting us present to you today. You're going to learn a lot about the communications plan for the year. You're going to meet the new team members, and we're going to talk a lot about some new tools that are being implemented. So we're going to start out with a video that is a compilation and is setting the tone for our presentation tonight. This is a short feature of the footage that Garrett has captured thus far since he's been here a whole 22 days. He has been out and about and extremely active and in schools and getting a lot of great footage and telling a lot of great stories. And this is just
Our mission states that District 205 students are educated, engaged, and empowered.
That's the Emerson media coverage. So the mission of our office is obviously to inform people, but there's some words in here that are in bold, and I'm just going to touch on them. And it's clear, accessible, consistent communications. I want to point out to the entire community, promoting our journey of excellence with two-way communication, positive community partnerships, and all leading to an enhancement of student learning. That is the mission of the Communications and Community Outreach Office. So here's the team. As you know, at the start of this year, we did a little bit of restructuring. You guys supported me in that, and I very much appreciate that. So it kind of introduces both Garrett and Carla and tells you a little bit about what they're doing. In short, in layman's terms, Garrett is creating the content, Carla's pushing the content. So we talk a lot about brand, and I want to be clear, this isn't brand in the way that you think of maybe Nike. This is brand in the way of who are we? What do we stand for? What do we talk about? And making sure that that really does describe who you are, because we are D205. The communications plan you're going to see, and I hope that you maybe have picked up on a little bit of it throughout social media so far, but everything is going to tie back to the strategic plan. Everything is going to be thoughtful. Everything is going to be, intentional, and is going to tie back. there's a purpose of sharing something just to share it, but everything that we're going to share is going to have a purpose, and it's going to tie back to the schools and our mission and our vision and our values. So in looking at the plan, it is a bit of a three-legged stool that the plan is built on. So first we define the audience, and the audience is not just our family members, because they are very much our number one resource or priority for communicating, but we also know that there's also that subset of audience that maybe doesn't have kids in school, but they still want to know what's going on. And so we want to make sure that we're reaching the entire community of District 205. It's also going to be data driven. You're going to hear a lot about that tonight. Carla's going to touch on that a little bit for you, but everything that we're going to do is going to be measured and monitored, and we're going to make sure that what we're doing is successful, and if it's not, we're going to pivot and make sure it is. And then really doing an intentional increased attention to community engagement. So getting out there in the community and connecting face to face with our community members through various ways, or offering Zoom educational sessions. Sorry, the word slipped my mind. So you'll see some more things like that, a little intentional focus more on community outreach. So looking at the tools, you're going to see Garrett talk now. I was going to talk for him, but I'm going to turn it over to him and let him talk. I'm on a roll. So I'm going to introduce Garrett Garcia. He is our marketing and communications coordinator, and he's going to talk to you a little bit about video and photo and why and the purpose behind it.
Good evening, everybody. Like you said, been 22 great days so far. A lot of new names and faces, but slowly but surely I'm getting there. But really, why video? My main goal is we want to build audience relationships and connections. When you get done watching something, I want to either invoke some type of, thought, feeling, or some type of curiosity, just to kind of, at the end of the day, drive traffic back to what we're doing. Not only, like she said, for internal people in the district, but externally as well, to kind of just show a path to the community of what we can do. Video is such a powerful tool nowadays. Everyone's on their phones, Instagram, TikTok, everything. So if we can try to increase our...
What's up, y'all? We here with the Sandburg Middle School Choir. What's up? On that top, go. Let me hear the Hey, leave me alone. Yes. Hey, leave me alone. Hey, leave me alone. Thank you so much, baby. Thanks for inviting me.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
For those that don't know Coach Porter, she is a nationally renowned opera and voice trainer. And so.
Precisely, yeah. They emailed her. They'd been using her exercises during COVID. And so 3 of the students kind of reached out, kind of just took a shot, and she replied. And that took place. So that kind of clip right there kind of goes on to the next subject, where everyone talks about attention spans and how much time people are watching and the length of videos. So that was about a minute clip. We'll put that on YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, kind of a short form content that we look to do, but also still do longer pieces. So we can do, something that's longer, then pull different clips of that to still, get those little, hopefully more viral clips out there. And then photography, not all too new, but still looking to continue to, make our digital assets fresh. A picture is sometimes the first thing that somebody interacts with when they see your brand. I know that's the first thing I look at when I go to check out new businesses. How active are they? What do their pictures look like? So over the past, like I said, 22 days, we've captured over 1,500 photos and tagged them. That's kind of one big thing I'm big on, where if someone comes to me and says, I need pictures of a computer lab at Sandburg, I can go through and click Sandburg, and I have it tagged computers. I can pull up all the pictures that of those students that match that tag. And then kind of what we've already spoken to, we've already kind of covered 16 different events and looking to do a lot more as I get to interact and meet with all the principal different staff.
16 events, 1,500 photos, 22 days. He's been busy.
So next is Carla Regalado, digital media specialist. She'll talk a lot about social media. Okay. Hi, everyone. I've been here a little bit longer than 22 days, but so
23.
Yeah, 23. But so a few topics that kind of have been covered was social media expansion and also data-driven communication. So I kind of just wanted to explain those a little bit more. So with social media expansion, we are kind of focusing on getting our schools to run an active account. So like Garrett said, everyone goes to social media right away. So we want to make sure that they're posting and being active, but also interacting with district accounts as well as community accounts so that we can reach those families who don't necessarily have children within our school system. As for data-driven communication, we're going to utilize data that we get from social media accounts as well as Parent Square and Google Analytics to make sure that we're making changes that are going to benefit everybody. One of our sort of new tools, because we're kind of revamping it, is our website. So with our website, we're going to have continuous kind of updates on there, and we're going to keep having these redesign efforts to make sure that it is more user-friendly for both the people who are publishing on it and the public users. A few things that are kind of being done every day to help this is we're going to look for outdated information and make sure that's updated and readily available to everybody. We're updating our slideshow pictures every 2 to 3 weeks to make sure that everything is up to date and they're staying informed on what events are happening. We're also going to update our headers, footers, and certain layout changes to make sure that there is a more cohesive feel when you're jumping from the district webpage to a school webpage. One of our newer tools is Parent Square. So that just started, but since starting, we have had 877 total posts. Of those posts, we've had 18 district posts, 253 school posts, and 100 class posts, and 506 group posts. We have also had 60 authors and have had 2,132 parents interact with those posts. So whether that's RSVPing, appreciating it, or commenting on it. Now going back to kind of the data-driven, we wanted to share a few analytics from our social media just to kind of help you guys see the bigger picture. So for our Instagram, our profile reach since July to September has grown 79.62%. Our profile activity has grown 182.72%. And just this month alone, we've actually gained 26 followers. For Facebook, our profile reach has grown 59.81%. Our profile activity has grown 69.51%, and just this month alone, we've gotten 11 new likes. Lastly, our Twitter. So our tweet impressions have grown 761.27%. I promise it's not a typo. And our profile activity has gone up 63.82%. And the way we're doing this is by using our social media analytics. So we're looking at the times where our users are most active as well as what content they're engaging with. We've also introduced our hashtag this year, the hashtag WeAreD205, and that has had 950 interactions and has reached 26.6 thousand individuals and has earned 5 shares and 925 likes. Yeah.
So as we talked about community events, so you've seen the conversations with the SOUP, you've also seen the K-5 literacy webinars. We're going to be looking at things like that and to expand and to be out in the community and interacting face-to-face, as I mentioned before. So the newsletter that I hope by now you all know and love, I've talked about it enough. So what we're doing is with the addition of Garrett, I said I put a lot of time and blood, sweat, and tears into this newsletter when it's being created, from the interviews that are done beforehand to writing it, to then laying it out and then mailing it out. I didn't want it to be a one and done. So Garrett and I have talked, and we're taking a couple of the stories that are going in the next newsletter and thereafter, and actually we'll have a QR code that you'll be able to scan and go to a larger video piece on that story. So for instance, 2 stories in the upcoming newsletter. One is on Madison. We sat down and talked to Dr. Condrant, and we're there for 45 minutes just talking and then walked around the school. I can't fit all of that in a tiny paragraph in the newsletter. However, Garrett can take that and really blow it up into an amazing video. We also, as we just discussed, went to York and interviewed the teacher of the incubator program, which is how I knew what the next course was going to look like. And you'll learn a lot more about it in the next newsletter and in the video piece that Garrett will be adding to that as well. All of that will also be shared then on social media so that we can continue throughout the quarter to make those stories stay alive. So community group emails. This is just another tool to reach the community that maybe doesn't have children in the school. So with Parent Square, we have the opportunity to create mailing lists that anybody can opt in to receiving our emails to. So there's certain lists that people are going to want to do that for, and certain lists that, you know, we know that they wouldn't. And so there's 3 on there right now: the board highlights, the reach, and the surge. So anybody from the public can sign up to receive updates and information on those parent groups and the board highlights to see what's going on. We've actually had quite a few people sign up since I put this on there. We've created a page on the website called Community Connections. With all these things that are being added, we wanted to have one-stop shop for people to go to find this information. So on the homepage, you're going to see a box that says Community Connections, and when you click on it, you're going to be able to find the link to sign up for your emails, the newsletter, what events are coming up, pictures from the last event, any webinars that we've done. We're going to have the recordings of them on that page. So anything that we've done new and as part of the Community Connections outreach is going to be on that page. And so there's a lot of words here, and I'm not going to make you read them, and I'm not going to even read them to you. It's more purposeful. So this is when I first started the communications plan, before Carla and Garrett even started, we threw some ideas out there of things that could be covered. In the short amount of time that we've had them, that we've been together, we've actually covered half of this list. But it's also a good point that there's no shortage of stories to be told. And so we actually, during the collaborative up here today, we put a spreadsheet out, and we asked the principals and the leaders to get on the spreadsheet and share over the next couple months 1 or 2 things that we could come to your school and cover. That spreadsheet filled up like that. So I said, I hope you're rested because you're going to be very busy. So it's just, we're really excited to tell a story, and you know, I think it's going to be a noticeable change, and I feel like the community in general, I hope everybody feels very informed and very I guess up to date on everything D205. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, any comments? Or Beth?
Very quick comment. Just want to say thank you. Everyone's so busy. I get like 5 million emails. So the social media reminds me, like, oh my gosh, you know, sign up for parent-teacher conferences is coming up. And the one-stop shopping helps you find everything in one place. So it's just helpful for all of us to have, and the videos so much easier. I can listen to that while I'm driving, you know, so it's just all really helpful for a very busy community. So thank you.
I think it's important to point out that you haven't even been here a year yet. So even though he's only been here 22 days, and I'm not sure how many days you've been here, but you haven't even been here. Okay. You haven't even been here a year, and you have done amazing work. And I think, you know, we live in the Chicagoland area where people who are deciding where they want their kids to go to school have a lot of choices, and they have a lot of good choices. And so the power of picture and video to share what's going on in our schools for both our taxpayers who don't have kids in school and can see what that looks like, and for, you know, families considering moving into our community, I think is amazing, and tells stories that, you know, how, you know, they wouldn't otherwise see. And for myself, I learn a lot by watching those stories and seeing the pictures of what's going on in classrooms and things. So thank you for that. Anything else? All right. Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. Now for an even more exciting presentation, medical dental benefit contracts. I'm giving you a little hype, Chris. It's 10 o'clock. Come on, Chris.
Oh no, other Chris.
All right, so tonight we have the renewal for next year's insurance premiums. This John McConnell from Assured Partners is normally here, but he was ill, and so he couldn't be here tonight. So I I am stepping in for him. So the insurance year is calendar year, January through December 31st. So we have every year the board approves the renewal in the October board meeting because we have open enrollment in November where our staff can choose their insurance options. So so this is the renewal. It was a challenging year for healthcare, health insurance, lots of, and so claims were up this year. The renewal called for a 13.5% increase. We have provisions in our collective bargaining agreements above 8%. Then the increase is split 50-50 between the district and the employee. So when that happens, we try to work with the committee to make recommendations, to make plan design changes, to try and get the increase down. And so the insurance committee works with the insurance broker on trying to find plan design changes. And so that happened this year. To get that 13.5% down, the insurance committee made recommendations. The staff voted for the changes, which reduced that increase down to 6.5%. So that was, a very positive outcome. It results in savings for the district and savings for the staff. And so that they don't have the burden of the huge premium increase, although it is a 6.5% increase. And medical inflation in the current market is the highest it has been in 5 years. That, along with the uptick in District 205 utilization, is driving the increase. So the plan changes. In the PPO1 plan, we had an increase in deductibles. We also had an increase in out-of-pocket, out-of-network, out-of-pocket maximums. Also, we increased the co-insurance from 90, or we reduced the co-insurance percentage, but so the co-insurance went from 90% to 80%. We also increased some of the RX copays. On the high deductible plan, there were just the IRS mandated changes that were required. And then in the HMO Blue Advantage plan, we increased deductibles, we increased out-of-pocket maximums, we increased the office visit copay, we increased the emergency room copay. And then also we made changes in the pharmacy. So we moved to the same formulary that the HMO Blue Advantage has. We also used the Accredo Specialty Program Suite, which includes mail order through Prime and copay assistance program, and we also eliminated the HMO Illinois plan. So the combined savings from the pharmacy and also from the HMO Illinois was $670,498, and then all the changes in deductibles and out-of-pocket maximums and copays was $329,040. The staff, supported these plan design changes, which reduced the premium increase from 13.5% to 6.5%, which results in significant savings for the district. And so the recommendation that is on the agenda tonight is to approve the renewal of the Blue Cross Blue Shield medical and dental plans for January 1, 23 to December 31st, 23, with the 6.5% increase in premiums with all those plan changes to the medical plans, and no premium changes to the dental plan. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments? Very appreciative of the lowered cost. Anything else? All right. Okay, then we will move on. All right. Next is the consent agenda. Does anybody have anything they want pulled?
I'd like to pull items C and F.
All right, anybody else? All right, could I have a motion for the consent agenda minus items C and F?
I move that the Board of Education approve the following consent agenda items. A, personnel report. B, financial reports. D, second read, Section 5, Personnel Policy 5240. E, second read, Section 7, Student Policy 7230. G, Student Services Staffing Agreement.
I'll second.
Okay. Oops. Motion by Mrs. Troutman, second by Mrs. Hostler. Please call the vote.
Mrs. Troutman?
Yes.
Mrs. Hassler?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
Mrs. Arvanitis?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
And Mrs. Caforio?
Yes, 7 ayes, no nays, motion passes. Okay, could I have a motion then for item C, please?
I move that the Board of Education approve the following item. Second read, Section 2, Board of Education Policy 2150.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Troutman, second by Mrs. Arvanites. Any questions or comments? Mr. Collins?
So here's why I pulled this item. Among many of the words that were stricken from this policy, I believe that striking the 4 words, but not limited to, prohibits the board from forming any new committee other than the 4 committees that are currently listed in the policy. I don't know why we would want to tie our hands like that. If the board feels there's a committee that should be formed in the future, by eliminating the phrase, but not limited to, makes us go through the arduous process of changing that policy and reinserting those 4 words, which, as you well know, takes months. I don't think it's in the board's best interest to eliminate those 4 words from this policy. It simply limits our options. And there seems to be no downside to including them.
Any comments?
Yeah, well, 2 things I'm thinking. In my interpretation of the reading, it does not limit us. I don't think removing those words limits our ability to form another committee if we choose to. I'm also wondering when the last time we formed a committee is, because these 4 committees, 2 of which are listed, and I can't log into Press, it's not working for me right now. We have just formulated, it's 2, right? If I'm remembering correctly. We have just formulated them and staffed them and are starting to live up to the policy. So, in my opinion, I don't think there's restrictions here placed upon us by the new wording, in my opinion.
There's also a part in the policy that talks about special board committees, and if we did need to create a committee that we needed to do quickly to accomplish needed work, that there is a portion of this that allows for that. So I think a committee that would be added, that would be a long-term thing, probably would need quite a bit of discussion and decision-making anyway. But for special circumstances, this policy does allow us to do that.
I don't think it's just for us as a board. I think it's looking at the future as well. I know that when I got on the board, committees were formed, and this policy, the way that it was stated, allowed us to just do that. And so we don't lose anything by keeping those words. We lose something by striking them.
Do we know why they're being taken out?
That's what I was going to ask Chris. Is it a press recommendation on language or? Is from the press, the legal or the.
That's exactly it. The press recommendation did not have that terminology. But, yeah.
There are only a certain set requirement of statutorily required board committees. The board committees that are listed there, in addition to our finance committee, which was added at the suggestion of our attorney after legal review, is listed there. So that's the first part of it. Under the policy revision that is being done here, there are a couple parts that are put together as a part of that. So the special board committee, as Beth pointed out there, is kept in there. It's just put in a different place. And then at the end, the other part that I want to point out to people is that nothing in this policy limits the authority of the superintendent or designee to create and use committees that report to that person or to other staff members. So there is a lot of leeway to create temporary committees. What they're really talking about here are the creation of standing committees.
That's correct. And the superintendent can appoint a superintendent's committee, but this would limit the board from creating a standing committee. We used to have 2 additional committees just a few years ago that were standing committees. If superintendent or the board president or the board collectively changes our minds and we want to add a committee, we have to change our policy because this limits us to these 4 committees. Unless we want to have a limited term committee, and by the wording of this policy is automatically dissolved after presenting its final report to the board at our board's discretion. I just don't know why anyone would want to limit their options. It makes no sense to me.
Well, I guess I'm confused by why you think this limits our options, because the footnote next to the standing board, first it says the board may establish the committee, a committee to assist with board governance, right? That's what these standing committees do. And the footnote to the standing board committees that listed is the board may create and list other standing committees. For example, an audit committee. So I'm unclear why you feel like it limits our ability to do what we may need to do in the future.
Because the policies as edited says a standing board committee is created for an indefinite term, although its members can fluctuate. Standing committees are 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right, but the heading of standing board committee links the footnote that says the board may create and list other standing committees. So my interpretation of this is these are the examples of the ones that are created. But the footnote clearly says the board may create and list other standing committees.
And I'm sorry, where does it say that? I
So
don't
just
see
if-
that. It says nothing in this policy limits the authority of the superintendent.
So I'm on press, and I'm on press policy, and when I, right here online, and I click the number 6 right next to standing board committee, it gives you the pop-up of the footer. And the footer is what I've read.
So how does that end up in our board manual? Because in the proposed policy, That doesn't exist. It only exists in your press version, not in our final version.
Well,
It is actually in Board Docs under the administrator content. 8C Review Policy 2150.
Well, I'm looking at a policy that I'm assuming is the policy we're going to adopt. And it's not under administrator content. I'd have to go back and see which heading it's under. Here, let me go look. It's under public content, the draft policy. That's what we're voting on, right? The draft
I know, but
policy.
we
We're
don't
not
ever-
voting on a policy that's in the administrative content.
Yep, well, what we're voting on is the changes to what it used to say. The policy manual, when we look at it and it's printed out, all the references, the footers and stuff are not printed in our hard copy. They're referenced. And that's what that number 6 reference is.
Then let's
So
put
when
it
you
in our
look-
policy.
Say again, I'm sorry, Ms.
Then let's put that reference in our policy and spell it out.
But it's in the online version. Not a single policy we have, Jim, that's in our manual or on the board doc or in the, I can't think of the other word, but that's printed out, lists all the footnotes. So are you asking to go back and reprint and re-adopt every policy with the footnotes included?
If you expect those footnotes to be in our policy,
But they
absolutely.
are. But they are. Right,
They're on the
thank you.
online, right?
They're on the online version.
which is what we moved to,
Right.
rather than having to continue to update a print version.
So you're assuring me that that footnote will be in our policy manual, giving the board authority to create any new committee that the board thank you, Karen, standing committee that the board collectively wants to create.
That's what the press policy indicates. And that's
Indicates
what
or
we're-
assures?
I don't know how I assure the board may create and list other standing committees. That's part of it. So I don't know what the difference between
I'm
indicates or
sorry,
assures.
I'm making too big a deal out of this. If it's in a footnote, I see no reason you can't put it in the text.
It's in the, I just wanted to let you know, on the board, on the district website, under school board, under the policy manual, those are on there when you pull up those committees, just so that you can see all the legal references and all of that.
I guess, from my perspective, the opening of the policy is the board may establish committees to assist with board's governance and in some situations comply with state law. So the ones that are listed are state law and then the one that we've added. But I don't see why it doesn't, like if we decide to have 2 other committees, we can establish that.
And what would you reference in that policy to support that?
The Board of Education may establish committees to assist with the board's governance function and in some situations comply with state law requirements.
That's how I read it too.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That first
I'm
sentence
not an attorney. No.
That's how I read it.
I just thought that by eliminating the phrase "but not limited to" limited our options. I had to believe that there was a reason those 4 words were in there to begin with.
Well, do you want to vote or do you want to our attorneys took it out, correct?
But this was taken out from a prior policy meeting. The attorneys reviewed it and brought back to the last policy meeting.
No, but I'm saying the attorneys took out the wording, but not limited to, is that correct?
No, I wouldn't say that the attorneys took
The
it out.
press.
Yeah, I think it's our alignment with, we utilize, the press policy overlay with ours and making sure that the integrity of the content is reflected in ours.
Gotcha.
The wording does allow us to form other committees there is wording in there that allows us to form other committees if we want. So I just wanted to make it clear that it's not tying our hands to forming other committees. Even if we do take those out, there's still other wording that says we can do it. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Clear that we can add, or future boards can add, a standing committee at any time.
Correct.
I'm sure that's why it's been in our policy is.
It's probably why they struck
It's been
it, because it
difficult.
was redundant, maybe.
Okay. All right, anything else? All right. Fair conversation, and let's call the vote.
Mrs. Troutman?
Yes.
Mrs. Arvanitis?
Yes.
Mrs. Hustler?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
No.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
And Mrs. Caforio?
Yes. 6 ayes, 1 nay, motion passes. All right, could I have a motion for item F, please?
Sorry. I move that the Board of Education approve second read, Section 8, School Community Relations 810.
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Mrs. Mrs. Troutman, second by Mrs. Hostler. It's getting late. Yeah, I know, over there. It's getting late. All right, Mr. Collins, comments, questions?
Sorry, my question here is really one of curiosity. This is a policy that the wording has been largely gutted. And we've taken phrases out that I don't quite understand why. We're taking phrases out like providing staff in the community with accurate, timely, and transparent communication, soliciting input and feedback from staff and the community, adhering to a policy of openness, honesty, integrity, and ethics in communicating with all stakeholders, establishing effective two-way communication systems that strengthen relationships with parents, staff, and the community, including members of the media, soliciting input and feedback from staff and the community. My question is, why are we taking those out?
Well, in my opinion, and I think the discussion at the policy committee meeting centered around this, we're also adding a section about community engagement and how we're engaging with the community on all those kind of points. I think that the press recommendations to remove those go back to the duplicity of the things that are being said throughout the policy. I think it is just to kind of pare down and prioritize all of the things. I mean, I don't really feel like these things are being removed. I think they're duplicated within the policy that was written, and so they're cleaning it up, in my opinion.
So I can actually speak to that if you would like to. So the review of this is a press recommendation. It hasn't been reviewed since 2015. This particular one really is, the purpose of it is really to speak more about press relations or media relations, and there's other things in there. And I think that the purpose of this that legal looked at, and we also looked at other school districts and what they had, it's really to put a better emphasis on who should and could be speaking on behalf of the district. The items that you're speaking about are absolutely important, and they are kept in here. As Courtney mentioned, they're just reworded. And to your point, some of those other things with that direct wording are mentioned later on in Section 8 under 895. So there are, all of those things do remain in this policy. Some of the wording has been updated. I think a lot of that wording was great, and it is, very attractive language and things that we should have in there. I think that the wording that is in there now is potentially more measurable and more monitorable. Before, it was really very nice wording, but I don't know that there was a lot of teeth behind it. What do I mean by that? I think that this one specifies a little bit more. So when we communicate, we're going to provide an annual report about it. And the other ones didn't specify things like that.
The wording in policy 895 is almost exactly, Jim, the important pieces that you were referencing are, I think it was just a different, it was redundant, but I think what Tanya's saying, like this was a little bit more press related. 895 is more parental involvement and communication with the community, but it is very similar wording if you want to take a look at that.
Yes, what was that number, Beth? Sorry.
It's 895.
895, right.
But it's under community relations.
This is
It's a
public
tab.
relations. This is about communication, like communication, like, you know, with the community in particular, you know, and that is about the whole, yeah. But all these things really are in the second part of the policy.
That was added. I think the whole section 8 is community relations, and then there's just different tabs and pieces of that underneath. But almost the exact wording that Jim was talking about, I just wanted to tell you, was in the parental involvement one.
So what in particular did you want left in?
As I said, I just had a question. Why were we taking them out?
Yes, redundancy is the simple answer. Any other comments or questions? Anything else? Okay. All right, then please call the vote.
Mrs. Troutman?
Yes.
Mrs. Hassler?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
No.
Mrs. Arvanitis?
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen?
No.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
And Mrs. Caforio?
Yes, 5 ayes, 2 nays, motion passes. All right. Next up is agenda action items, approve superintendent goals. Based on some feedback, this is a routine agenda item, but I'm going to pull it from the agenda for tonight because the board would like a little time to dig into our IAR and SAT data before we engage in a discussion about goals. So we will revisit this later time. So we will move on then to item B, approve medical and dental benefit contracts. So if I could have a motion for that.
I move that the Board of Education approve the renewal of the Blue Cross Blue Shield health and dental insurance plans for the January 1 to December 31st, 2023 year as presented.
I'll second. Okay, motion by Mrs. Hassler, second by, who was that? Athena, Mrs. Arvanites. Any comments about that? Questions? Okay, please call the vote.
Mrs. Hassler?
Yes.
Mrs. Arvanitis?
Yes.
Mrs. Troutman?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
Mrs. Stufen?
Yes.
Mr. Kaczynski?
Yes.
And Mrs. Caforio?
Yes, 7 ayes, no nays, motion passes. All right, superintendent's communication, fall housing enrollment update.
Just wanted to update the board on our enrollment this year. The fall housing is always September 30th enrollment numbers. So we at Madison, we are up 42 students from 263 to 305. At the elementary level, K through 5, we're up 66 students from 3,417 to 3,483. At the middle schools, we are up 50 students, 1,754 to 1,804. At York, we are down 44 students from 2,744 to 2,700. And so overall this year, we are up 114 students from 8,178 to 8,292. And when you look over the 8-year period here, back in 15-16, we were at 8,326. To this year, we're at 8,292. So it's been rather stable enrollment over the period covered. And up 114 overall from last year to this year.
questions about that? Yeah, Karen.
Yeah, so I don't have it in front of me, but if I looked at it, we are still down pre-COVID. So the question on numbers, is it what we would have projected or not? You probably don't know that answer, but it'd be interesting. Like, those are the sorts of things why this is meaningful. We want to make sure that we, have as many public students as we can, right? And we keep them. So context, I think, is important. Like, otherwise, okay.
Yeah, I think I'm looking at that overall chart. Does it look like, are we calling the COVID year the 2021? Because I think that at the elementary levels, we're higher than 2021. And same with, middle school levels were 3 less. It's really at the high school that we're seeing it only. Am I reading that correctly, Chris?
Yeah. Courtney, I would think that 1920 would be the relevant
1920?
pre-COVID year.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
okay. Oh, it's
Yeah.
So it seems
March
like
of
about
20, so that would have been, so the drop, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Got it. Yep. Thank you.
about a third of the loss in students has been recovered so far.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think that stabilization speaks to even, most recently, the city provided a survey. And part of the survey, one of the indicators of why, what they love most about Elmhurst were the schools. And so I think that directly, again, correlates to how important our work of all of us that are sitting around the table. And just thank you, even in the midst of a long evening and a lot of very great, robust conversation and wonderful questions. It's so that we continue to live up to the standard that has been set by our community of maintaining really great schools.
I know even just on Saturday at the Lincoln Open House, I met 4 families that were considering moving to Elmhurst, and they wanted to see what our schools look like. So if somebody's telling us, they're hearing it somewhere, right? Like they're moving into Elmhurst to look at our school or coming to see them.
I had an actual family, as Kathy reached out to Kathy to meet with me. They have 2 sons that are 3 and 1, and they wanted to engage with the superintendent because of what they've heard about the schools in preparation for 3 years down the road for enrolling in our schools. So again, you're right. Like there's talk, there's discussion, and we're going to continue to engage with potential families.
All right. Thank you for that. Okay. I guess Freedom of Information next.
1 FOIA request for speaker expenses granted. 1 FOIA request for specific attorney billing not in possession.
All right. Social media highlights out there. Social media highlights. Go. Go.
I mean, man.
Talking over your boss.
Wow. You know what I'm saying?
I'll also point out that Carla does do sound.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Okay, board communications, anybody have anything? All right. Then we have upcoming meetings. Next week, October 26th, Committee of the Whole Board of Education meeting here at 5:30. Reminder, everybody, 5:30. Here in District 205 Center. And then November 3rd, 2022, Finance and Operations Committee here at District 205 Center, 5:30.
Just take your time. We're doing good on time tonight.
And November 15th, 2022, regular scheduled Board of Education meeting at 7 o'clock here in District 205 Center. We've come to the end of the agenda. We are adjourned.